Hello and welcome to Defense Diaries. I am your host, Bob Mata, and today is Thursday, August 7th, and I am coming directly from New Orleans, Louisiana. I'm at my friend's beautiful home. Hopefully it'll be quiet for the next hour plus. I'll do the best that I can to do that. But before we jump into it tonight, I have a very exciting news for Allie and I. We have a sponsor for the show. So I'm gonna do a little ad right here, a little host right at the beginning. And I'm thrilled to have Shopify sponsor the show. They're a company that I really wish was in my sphere of knowledge at the time that I started the podcast, because they're really a fabulous company. But in terms of yourself, if you're out there, because when I started the podcast, it was scary. I was 20 plus years into my law career. I went to Alice and I said, "Can I do this? Will you allow me to kind of phase out of the practice?" She said, "Of course." But I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't realize that there were scripts and setups and logos and marketing and recording and editing and creating a brand. I just didn't get all that. And it was overwhelming and it was scary. And if I had known that Shopify existed in the world, that would have made my life so much easier and way less daunting in terms of starting this thing out. And it's just one of those companies that if you are sitting at home thinking, wow, I've got a great business concept, whether it's t-shirt design, whether you make beautiful art that you think you should be selling, whether you have a cookbook, whatever it is, whatever your business idea is, you're no longer in a place where there's no one out there to help you. And Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US. And they have companies like household names like Mattel and Gymshark to brands that are just getting started. And you can get started with your own design studio with hundreds of ready-to-use templates. Shopify helps you build a beautiful online store to match your brand style. So accelerate your content creation. Shopify is packed with helpful AI tools. Will write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography. So get the word out like you have a marketing team behind you. Easily create email, social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. And best yet, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing returns and beyond. So if you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. So turn your business into cha-ching with Shopify on your side. That's cash. You don't know what cha-ching means. So sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/DD, as in Defense Diaries. So go to shopify.com/DD for $1 per month trial. Shopify.com/DD. Cha-ching. Get your business rolling. All right. That takes care of that business. So I am going to bring on a lawyer who has a heart and soul, which makes him my favorite type of attorney. When I met him, initially, I could tell immediately that I was going to be fast friends with him because we're very much cut from the same cloth. When you hear him try a case, you're just getting the genuine Andy Baldwin in front of you. And he has that ability to be able to connect with jurors because of that. And that's a real skill, but beyond that, it's that genuineness that allows him to connect with jurors in a way that some attorneys just can't do, no matter how hard they try, because they just don't have that in them. So, and if you don't know, Andy obviously was Richard Allen's attorney, along with Brad Rosie and Jennifer Auger, and they tried a hell of a case under the worst of circumstances. I can't think of more brutal circumstances that these three lawyers had to try to navigate in terms of getting that thing to trial. And they were stripped of everything that they could typically be able to do in terms of putting on a defense. And they went with what they had, and I thought that they put on a heck of a case in spite of it all. And I mean, the results are the results, but the fight's not over. So let's bring him on. Andy, what's up, my friend?
Hi, Bob. Good to be back on.
Indeed. So this big Hulu documentary dropped, and we're going to talk about that quite a bit tonight. But what else is going on with you? How's life?
Well, the life of a trial lawyer is just there's always new adventures and new things you have to tackle. And then you also run in a business, a law firm. Could have used Shopify, by the way, many years ago when I started this law firm. But, I got a great team over here, great lawyers that work with me. And one of them, my son just took the bar. Okay. So there's that.
Nice.
And he's just, the bar is, I'd like to do a segment sometime on the ridiculousness of a bar exam and how ridiculous it is. And it has nothing to do. Well, I hear this argument. Well, it really is intended to weed out the bad lawyers. Like, oh, okay. So there's no bad lawyers in Indiana, huh? Okay.
Yeah.
So it's ridiculous. But anyway, he's all freaked out over that.
Yeah. When you walk out of that thing, and I took the Illinois bar and I passed that. And then I went, when Allie talked me into becoming a lawyer out in Pennsylvania and hanging our own shingle, which was a terrifying concept. But you walk out of those bar exams having really no idea how you've done, because in the multi-state portion, which existed, when I took the bar, and that's 200 essay or 200 multiple choice questions, and there is no incorrect answer. So all four of your potential answers are all right in some way. And what we're supposed to do is try to figure out which one is the most correct. And then you have your written portion, which for us was day 2, which was state specific. And that's the essay portion where, and when I took it, and I'm sure it was the same when you did, it was longhand. So I wasn't typing anything on a computer, which, would have been easier for a couple of reasons. One, my writing's really terrible. And I was literally afraid that they weren't going to be able to read what I was writing.
It's not a bad plan, though. If you don't know what you're saying, then they have to be like, well, I guess what he wrote here is probably
the words that I could read seemed good. But tell your son not to worry about it, because you're right. I mean, it's black letter law. It has nothing to do with the practice of law. It's just, did you learn anything? Did you learn how to identify issues? And
I'm super proud of him. He initially, he called me when he was a junior in college, and he said, Dad, I got some news. And he's on the phone sounding all kind of weird. And I said, yeah, what's going on? He's like, I think I'm going to go to law school. And I said, nice. Oh, that's great. That's what I think your God-given skill set is. That's where you should do what you should do. And he said, yeah, but my mom's a lawyer and my dad's a lawyer. And no, I'm going to be a lawyer. He's got a contrarian streak in him. I don't know where he gets that.
Yeah.
And, but he, then he tried his hand at being a prosecutor the first 2 summers between his first and second year and third year of law school. And because he's a contrarian, and they offered him a job and he turned it down. And he just said, I can't I can't do it. You know,
Yeah.
I wanted to be different, but in the end, he's a criminal defense attorney, and I'm super proud of him. And he's going to do great work. He's got a job at the Marion County PD agency, and he's going to be fighting hard for people. I know he is, and it makes me happy.
We need guys like that, you know, we really do. And it's that's the toughest gig, because we were talking off screen. I'm out here interviewing an old legendary Louisiana lawyer who just had, like, the clients that he's had range from politicians at the highest level in the state down to like every single kind of case that you can imagine. He's been very successful in terms of his trial work, you know, and he's got that Matlock feel because he's down in Louisiana. So I could completely see him walking in with like a seersucker suit. Yeah. You know, he's got that whole vibe. But, you know, like he was saying, you know, I really take my hat off to lawyers that go into the PD's office where you're dealing with just the criminal justice system 50 you know, weeks out of a year. You know, maybe you get a couple weeks off, but, you know, just because your son, and I'm sure that you've forewarned him and he knows enough about your practice and, you know, the peaks and the valleys that you've had, that, you know, I mean, the system kind of chews you up and spits you out from the defense side of it, just because fighting the government is really, really hard to do, you know? So
it's almost an impossible task, really.
It is. So we're all rooting for him for sure. And I love that he's going, because you can't get better training than going into a PD's office, man.
Let's throw you in the deep end.
That's it, man. That's it. So that's good. And the wife's good.
Michelle is watching, I'm sure, and she's my biggest advocate, but she's always worried about what I'm going to say, and so you know, she's like, don't, you know, you can't, you know, just watch what you say. And you know, it's hard for me because the Hulu special is really great, in my opinion, because what we wanted to do, I think, was there. This is a polarizing case, obviously, and there's these hardcore pro Richard Allen people, and then there's these hardcore, you know, anti Richard Allen or pro Abby and Libby would be another way to say it. And I get that, and I understand that. But then there's this group in the middle that hasn't really paid attention to the case so much, or maybe a little bit. And what we didn't want to do was go on to like a Netflix or something that could have really catered to the defense in a lot more detail and with a lot more information, and it would have been really one-sided. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. And I'd love for that to happen actually now. But the first kind of, you know, when we were getting offers to participate in these things, it's a whole new world for me. Yeah. And I think we were really attracted to ABC News being affiliated with this project, because as I've often talked about, in fact, there's the one clip that everybody seems to like about when I went down and said something, you know, journalists, it's time to start being journalists. Mm-hmm. I really stand by that. And that's what I wanted. I wanted an even-handed approach so that those people in the middle lane aren't off-put by, this is just a defense, you know, job. And no, let's get it done down the middle the right way. And I've heard, and I don't get on the internet or anything like that. I just don't. Yeah. But I've heard from the people that reach out, that there are those out there that are upset about it because the defense position got out there. And I'm like, what I want to say is, can we just have a bone? Can we have a little bit of opportunity to present our case? We believe honestly that we have an innocent man, Richard Allen, and he's suffering right now. And he has been suffering since November of 2022. And we have a perspective, and we have an opinion, and we have facts that back up that perspective and that opinion. And I don't fault all those people on the other side at all for their opinions. I don't harbor ill will against them at all. Right. That's their opinion. I think they're wrong. And I think maybe they're not looking at things the correct way. But you know, I harbor zero ill will toward them. And so I just hope that the Hulu special did not get into as much detail. I know there's probably a lot of people on here tonight that are, you know, they know this case inside and out, and they maybe were hopeful for some more detail for those people. I've heard this come out that there's a kind of a vacuum for Karen Reed people that were super interested in that case. And this case has a lot of similarities to that, apparently. And I've started to learn a little bit about that. And yeah, come aboard and keep an open mind. And you'll see that maybe there are similarities to what's going on there. And so that's the reason I'm doing this. And I've done a couple of interviews. I did a real meandering one yesterday. I could not, I mean, I was all over the place, and it's hard because I get on one train and then I'm like, oh, I don't have, my time is limited. I need to go down this other. I don't want to do that tonight. I've got kind of whenever it's appropriate, I've got basically a few things that I would have wanted in the documentary that ABC they just don't have the time to do it. I mean,
yeah,
I don't understand that world, but they had 3 episodes and that's it. And I thought the producer who put it together, Grace Miller, and Hannah Shakespeare also was involved. I thought they did a really terrific job of being fair down the middle. And I'm pleased with it. I'm pleased.
Yeah, I got through it last night. I obviously wanted to be able to watch all of it. I'm friends with Hannah. I thought that, and the way that this thing works is when, and it's been a passion project for Hannah for 8 years. She's been following and filming and, working this case for years. And in terms of, when you sell it to a streamer, in terms of they're saying, okay, we'll buy it and we'll buy 3-hour-long episodes or, 45-minute episodes. Hannah's probably got 150, maybe more plus hours of tape in the can, so, and when you're dealing with a streamer like that, they're typically not going to want a one-sided affair. So Hannah's got to come in with, trying to give kind of a down the middle view of, what the case is. And I thought she did a great job in presenting both sides. And like you said, in terms of kind of getting into the weeds with everything that happened with the case pre-trial would have taken 10 episodes.
Yeah.
So, she had to pick and choose. And when Hannah turns in her final cut, that's her final cut. That's not ABC News's final cut. So she has no idea. Cause I've been trying to get a Gacy thing made for years, and I've had so many interviews with so many streamers, and I've heard from my showrunner that was trying to sell the show, you can't try to sell it that way. It's like, it's not what they want. They're trying to get the draw. And so in terms of knowing the hurdles that Hannah was up against, and really that Hulu and ABC has the final call on whatever she's going to put in there and what they're going to cut in terms of what they want, what they think is going to be the most effective in terms of drawing streamers, she's stuck with whatever they got. And I just thought she put together a very balanced look at it. Yes, there were gaping holes, but like I said, that wasn't Hannah. In 3 45-minute episodes or even an hour, you can only fit so much in. You've got to tell the victim's family side of the story. You've got to let the people know about the girls. None of us are surprised that none of law enforcement or the prosecutor's office agreed to do it. She had to use clips that I guess they agreed to allow them use from other interviews they did.
It was probably from ABC local. I think that's probably why they were able to allow
it. Might have been because I know the McClellan interview was something that was done shortly after the trial was done, and the same with Holman had done 2 shows with Gray Hughes and then Hidden True Crime. When they were doing that route because they were guilters, as I like to call them, so that was a safe landing spot for them. Yeah. Just like, you guys we were a safe landing spot for y'all.
I was, but I also did a lot of local news, and I took some fire from, I had some people angry at a local guy that I was not mad at him all. He was getting some guff because he asked me some hard questions, and I reached out to him and said, hey, great job. You put my feet to the fire, and that's appropriate. And that's what you ought to do.
Yeah.
And don't, he didn't care. Russ McQuade's his name. He's a little bit of a character, but that's fine. Just be fair. That's
Right.
what, just be fair. If you're a journalist, you got to be fair to both sides. So that's the thing that just keeps, there's still room for journalism on this case. Big time. And I'm talking about the old school, journalism, where investigative journalism. There has been since, for forever on this case. There was a big moment on September 18th when the Franks of 2023, when the Franks memo was released. I thought maybe that's going to get some investigative journalists cooking a little bit. And over the course of the case, I thought there'd be other opportunities. And still to this day, there's just a lot that has not been answered, and nobody's asking the tough questions. And I hope that happens. So, and that's one of the, that's some of the stuff that I can talk about related to what I would have hoped could have been in the documentary. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to say about it. Generally speaking, again, if you all think I knew what was going to be on it, you are wrong. When I sat in my living room with my wife and watched it, I was nervous because
you have no idea.
Yeah, I didn't know what was going to be on there, and I didn't remember what I had said back in the day, because I got interviewed for this thing like in January or February or something.
Yeah.
And then you worry about how they're going to slice it up and stuff. And I thought it was fair. And anyway,
and like watching it, and I've seen it, Allie and I have been on Dateline, and, the way that they edit can take things and put them, completely out of context. And Hannah didn't do that in terms of what it was. I thought that she structured it in a way that laid out both sides of the argument as much as she could without getting into the weeds, because like I said, she really was able to avoid Judge Gull like entirely.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that whole part of it, but that's for down the road, and to kind of address your thing with journalism and investigative journalists, they still very much exist, Andy. The fact of the matter is they're just not mainstream media. Like you're looking at them. Like I get boots on the ground. I will dig. My thing is, in terms of what I'm willing to put out as far as content, I don't like to speculate. So if I can go down and interview somebody where I feel like it's something that's going to be helpful and I can substantiate it or corroborate it, then it's something I'll run with, in terms of investigative type of journalism. But I mean, it's shifted really where you're not going to see it from mainstream media anymore, and you're going to see it from this platform that you're on right now, which is YouTube or even TikTok. A little less with Instagram, but those two platforms really are where you're seeing the people who do dig, and they want to talk to people. So we're out there doing it. It's a changing world. You know what I mean? It's like the days of clicking on your TV and putting on ABC News and seeing hard-hitting news is over. It's dead. It's never coming back. We're in a world where the internet rules, where that's where we're getting most of our content. Between the news, I haven't watched like actual news program like on the 10 o'clock news in 10 years, man. Like I just don't watch it. I get all my news from Twitter. I get all my news from YouTube and different channels. And, you find the people that you can trust. That's why it's important to me to always try to be accurate. And if I take a position on a case, I let people know that. Yeah. Like, there was all this bullshit with me early on from people like the Murder Sheet and like, oh, he's defense. Yeah, no shit. My channel is called Defense Diaries. I'm a defense lawyer. Like, but what I was saying about Rick's case initially was, yes, I had a relationship with the defense prior to trial, but I wasn't asking you guys to share what the evidence was, because it puts me in a compromised position of me being in a position where I might slip and say something that I shouldn't know. So I would never even have dreamt of asking you guys about anything. I just wanted to talk about generalities, talk about the law, talk about the process moving forward. And that's exactly what our relationship was, moving through the trial. And, now we're in a different position that the trial has happened. And my position was, I don't know if Rick's innocent or guilty prior to trial, because I don't know what the evidence is. So, but I do know he's being railroaded. Like, so like leading up to the trial, I was watching a man get railroaded, irrespective of what his innocence or guilt. Now, after the trial, after I saw all the evidence, okay, I'm like, yeah, this guy's factually innocent, and he got railroaded. So both those things are true for me in my perspective. And now that things are coming out, you know, they released some of the exhibits, we got the transcripts, the world's getting to hear what happened in that courtroom, not just during the trial, but pre-trial as well. So, and like you said, I have been actively recruiting all the Karen Reed people. They have a gaping hole now in what they should be looking at. And this is a case that I believe is exactly what they should focus on, because it's a case that's important. It's a case that was high publicity, and it wasn't nearly as high publicity as Karen Reed because of the way that Gull handled it. She had it tried in the dark. There was no streaming, and you guys fought to get streaming out there. You wanted this thing streamed. You wanted this to be tried in the sunlight. She refused to do it, aside from the day that she bamboozled you guys and basically ran you off the case. That was
the talking about October the 19th, 2023.
Yeah. It was. I
remember that day.
Oh,
the only day that cameras were allowed in the courtroom.
That's right. And it was. She
Despicable.
Was real nice to you there, Andy, because she granted your motion. Oh, I'm going to grant your motion, defense, and I'm going to allow cameras in the courtroom. She literally wrote that in her order. Like, I'm going to grant your request for cameras in the courtroom. And then, like, I was sitting in the courtroom. That was up in Fort Wayne that day, and I'll never forget it. I didn't see you guys out at counsel table the entire morning. Didn't see Rick the entire day. And, you know, I'm like wondering what the hell is going on. An hour in, when we're sitting in the courtroom, because they let us in right at 9. And then, 15 cops walk in and they all sit in the jury box. And I'm like, wow, what is going on here? Brad runs out and whispers to Kathy a couple of times. I'm like, something's going on here. And then she comes out and makes that infamous speech about, some unforeseen events taking place. So
unforeseen, except she had handwritten everything that was, going on in chambers. And right, I get tired. Part of me gets tired of talking about her, because I want, there were people that were apparently saying, I don't know if she claimed in one of her, and I don't have any reason to doubt her, that she was getting death threats. And that's wrong. I mean, all these people that I don't have to agree with everything. I can think that they've done a lot of really bad things, but I try to respect the robe. I do. And I even want to respect law enforcement, but I don't. My starting position, it doesn't matter whether it's law enforcement or the guy that picks up my garbage. I start out with the presumption that they're going to be respected, and then they can prove to me that they don't deserve that through their actions. And unfortunately there was a lot of that going on in this case over time. I just really lost some hope in humanity at periods of time. But I can tell you here, everybody, if you've ever been on had been in the worst moments of your life, October 19th was one of those days for me. And then you can bounce back, and it's really true. And I tell clients that all the time when they come in. I just told a guy that earlier today. He's experiencing some bad, embarrassing things, and I just said, you're going to get through it, man. You really are. And I know you don't believe me, but other people have come into my office and said, you remember you told me that I would be okay, and I am okay, and thank you. And they need to hear that from time to time. And Brad Rosie kicked my butt and put me back in the right frame of mind. And that's a whole thing. One of the things I do you mind if I transition, Bob?
Andy, I told you this is your show, baby. You do whatever you want to do. You say as much or as little as you. I don't want you to get in trouble with your wife, so but
that's hard.
You've got the floor, my brother. So
I appreciate that, Michelle. I'm going to do whatever you want. I'm going to do the best I can to keep it together here and not meander, for one thing. So just go through a few things that were not able to be included on the Hulu. And I do encourage people to get out there, view it, and encourage other people to view it, just so that they can, I'm not here. Nobody's asking me to do that. And if I didn't like it, and if I thought it was unfair, then I wouldn't be saying that.
Yeah, and just for the record, let me interrupt. So the name of it is called Capturing Their Killer. Okay, and it's The Girls on the High Bridge. It's on Hulu. It's doing very, very well on Hulu. It should be on your first screen within the first, under new or for you. But it's worth 3 hours of your life because it really does give you a good introduction to the case. Gives you a good idea who the girls are. And then, about halfway through the second episodes, it shifts to the arrest. And we start learning about Rick Allen and the case against him. We meet his wife, Kathy, who's a dear friend of mine and who is just crushed right now. And you can see that it's been absolutely devastating for her and continues to be that and will be that until if and when Rick is able to get out of prison and this thing is overturned and he gets a new trial and he's vindicated. But I mean, her life has been destroyed the same way that the victims' families' lives have been destroyed in a different way, but destroyed nonetheless. And I always talk about cases like this. It's, everybody that's affected firsthand, whether it's the defendant's family and the victims, like everybody's life is changed in the worst way possible. It's just they're devastating cases, and I think that people sometimes forget about that. And
even on the defense side, you can forget. And then I thought what was really great was in that first episode. Well, it's kind of throughout, but it was good. I got to see Abby and Libby and kind of some funny videos and some photographs and things, and it that touched me. It did.
Me too. I mean,
So I mean, but but when you get into the stuff I'm about to talk to, then it can come off as, oh, he doesn't care about them, and that just isn't the case. I want justice for those girls, just like the Patty family does and the German family do. And Abby, Anna Williams and her family, I do, and they probably don't believe that, but I do, because I believe through that justice for them, Rick Allen will be released. And so every morning I do pray that, and I hope that this, I pray that who knows about what actually happened actually comes forward, or who actually even did it, the people, because I believe there's no question there's multiple people involved, and I hope they have some type of transformation in their life, that whoever does know, that they come forward, because that'd make things a lot easier. It really would. And I think everybody would be just joyful if we actually knew what actually happened, because the evidence does not stack up that Richard Allen committed these terrible crimes. One of the ways, and that'll segue into this. One of the things that was super important in the trial, and it was a big moment, was, and I have to set it up for those that don't know about the case, or know not as much as they might soon learn. The state's version of events is that Richard Allen, that these two girls got on a bridge and they walked across the bridge, and then Richard Allen followed them all the way across the bridge. And this famous video that's taken at 2:13 p.m. on February the 13th, 2017, 2:13 p.m., that famous video, you can see a guy on a bridge that has been labeled bridge guy. And the police say that's the killer. And law enforcement said that, prosecution said that. And so from 2:13 up until about 2:31, it was about 17 minutes. So 2:30, 2:31, in that short time span, the state's version of events is that Richard Allen followed them, abducted them, perhaps they would say by using a gun to intimidate these girls, down a very steep hill, down to where there's an access road. And then you have to go beyond the access road down to the bottom, which is about 70 feet below the bridge. Okay, so the bridge is up here, and by the time you get down to the bottom where the creek is, it's about 70 feet. Across in the 17-minute time span, Richard Allen, according to the state, told these girls, or they crossed this creek. Deer Creek is what it's called, and it was higher than, it was about a foot or so higher than normal. It was rushing. There might be, I'm trying to be fair, there might have been little areas where it wasn't where you could maybe find some spots where you didn't have to get as wet, but or you didn't have to worry about the tide tearing you down. But for the most part, where that area was, you would have to at least at some point in time cross, and where the river or the creek was a little bit, it was traveling pretty fast. And then in this 17-minute time span, Richard Allen and the two girls crossed, got up the bank somehow. And the bank across there is pretty steep in most points around that area. And it's not very far from the bridge. It's a few hundred yards from where the end of the bridge is. And that's one thing that people don't know. They may think that it's a mile away or half a mile away. It's not. It's a few hundred yards away where the girls were ultimately found. So in the 17-minute time span, the girls go up the bank somehow with Richard Allen, is what the state says happened, and then takes them into this wooded area, and somehow over this 17-minute time span, which started with the abduction at 2:13, somehow in that short period of time, he killed both of them with a knife. He undressed, or somehow one of them was undressed, Libby, and her clothing ended up on Abby. Now, one thing I forgot to tell you is, and this was kind of a new thing that ended up at the trial, was they're coming up with a 17-minute time frame because of an alleged a claim by Dr. Monica Walla, who was with Richard Allen at the prison. Dr. Monica Walla, who was a crime junkie, true crime junkie. Dr. Monica Walla, who had been out before even Richard Allen had been arrested, had been out on the High Bridge, who had listened to podcasts about the High Bridge and the Delphi murders. This was the person that was psychologically taking care of Richard Allen when he was in a prison, which is a whole nother story. But he's in the worst prison, pretrial detainee. He should be at a county jail, but he's in solitary confinement for months and months and months on end. And as the documentary talks about, after 15 days, it is considered torture. And she becomes his kind of confidant, I guess. And this is a woman who was infatuated with the Delphi case. And as I said in the documentary, she had no business, none, zero, being in any world that Richard Allen, where he existed, none. What honorable people should have done, and what she should have done, therefore, is said, I know a lot about this case. I'm passionate about this case. I'm getting out. I'm not going to be able to handle his case. But that's not what she did. Instead, she got on, as it says in the documentary, I think it says it, she got on to computers and looked for things. And she's paying attention to what's on the web. And what's on the web, by the way, is lots of talk about a van, a white van. It's in all kinds of, if you just Google it, between 2017 and 2022, there was a theory out there that there was a van, a white van, that was being used and somehow involved in the crime. So getting back to what the state says happened, the state says that, and this was through Dr. Walla. Dr. Walla said, Richard Allen told me that what happened was he was going to abduct these girls and rape them, but he got freaked out because he saw a van. And so that's why he went across the river, and that's why he did what he did. That's what they said, and that all happened in 17 minutes. And this was a very pristine crime scene outside of the bizarreness of the sticks on the girls and the blood on the tree. But there was no DNA, at least if you believe the state, there was no DNA left behind. So whoever was there did a great job of cleaning up. And Libby had blood on her hands, and also about her body. And it was a nude body. And Abby Williams was pretty, for the most part, clean. She had no blood on her hands, as if somebody had taken the time. She was treated very differently than Libby, and to take the time to wash the hands. And I'm bringing all this up because I want you to get the idea of how much time this would have taken for one man to accomplish, let alone in the middle of the day where other people are walking along the bridge, and they came in and testified at various points in time. And that sound traveled really terrifically through that canyon. And if there was anybody in and or around the bridge, there's no question they would have heard that. We had our own, Brian Alvey was one of our investigators. He did a sound test where you basically had to talk about as loud as I am, and you would be able to hear noises from where Abby and Libby were found ultimately to the bridge. And so all of that had to, go ahead.
So I went out there, and at the point in time, now I had been out there prior, but when I went out there the last time when I was down for the trial and I got down early, I went out there, just to your point, you know how they've built, it's no longer just the bridge that spans the entire creek now. Now they've built because it was dangerous, I mean, the thing was in complete disrepair. That's another thing about this bridge. There were entire ties missing. There were ties that were broken. It was scary. It really was a scary bridge, to where you'd have to be young or young at heart to want to cross it. But when I got to the end where they have the railing, because they put a concrete path with railings on both sides and then one at the end, and you'd have to climb over that railing to get on the bridge these days. But so I was out there by myself. Allison was walking a different part of the trails, and I got out to the end, which is probably just in front of where that first platform on the right would be. That's about the distance of where it is. Now, when you're looking down, facing south, which is what the state's theory was, is where the girls went down this hill. If you look behind you back north, you're able to get up onto a larger kind of incline. So you'd be going up. And if you go up around that way, then you don't have to cross the creek, and you can get down to Ron Logan's property where the crime scene was. Right. So, but when I'm standing there, and there was nobody else out on the trail that day other than Allison and two other people. So when I was there, it was stone cold quiet. And I heard a small woodland creature, like just walking around probably 50 yards away from me, up in that inclined area on the north side. And I could hear it as if it was 3 feet away from me. Like, I thought it was a deer because it was so prevalent. The noise was so loud. So this concept of that many people being out there at this time, and this crime taking place at that time, and no one hearing a scream, because if you're using common sense, the way I've always looked at this case is that if it's one perpetrator, two girls, that there's no way that you're going to be able to keep both girls quiet if in fact it's one perp and he starts doing horrible things to one of the girls and the other one is watching it. That girl, along with the girl that's being attacked, are going to be screaming, I would think. Doesn't common sense dictate that? Because there was no proof at trial. Core tried to say maybe I saw something on her lip that could have been like maybe residue from there's no proof whatsoever that the girls were gagged in any way, shape, or form. So meaning that they would have had the ability to scream. So that has always been a really, really powerful sticking point for me in terms of this crime taking place at the time that the state believes it took place. And like, that's the other thing about this thing. You have to understand going into any case that the state's theory is nothing more than that. It's a theory, as well as the defense. If the defense develops their own theory, it's their theory, and it's based on the evidence. And each side can and does have different theories of what happened. So, because remember, Andy, if we're drawing new people in, there's nothing that you can say here I don't want you to worry about repeating anything that you may have said in the past, because we got new eyes on this. So talk about all of it that you want to, because we need to fill people in on all the things.
So thank you. And the sound moves around there. There's no question about that.
Crazy.
And in 17 minutes, here's what, if you read the Franks memo, and I think you can get online and read it. It's 136 pages that really does a great job. And this is back in September 2023 of putting together the defense, one of the defense theories of what might have happened based upon not conjecture, not about our own investigation. This is based upon the state's evidence that they haphazardly gave us in different, in a lot of different hard drives and so forth, and that we found and that we put together. And in that, it does a really great job of explaining how it is really impossible for one man. It goes step by step about what a person would have had to do to get to the crime scene that the police found when they found the girls. Okay. And one of the big things, is, Abby is wearing Libby's clothing, and that's just a bizarre thing. And it's never been explained. And they didn't explain it at trial. There's some clothing out in the creek, and that clothing, there's no explanation about why that was out there. There's no theory on their end. And what happened is when the police arrived, when they found it, there's some people that were walking, looking for the girls. They found that they started by finding the clothing out in the creek. That's what they said. We see this clothing out in the creek, and it was you could see it clearly. I mean, it wasn't like it was hidden, and it was a pink, I believe it was a pink outfit, but pink top and some other things. And it was kind of bright. And one thing that people may not know, and they wouldn't know it from the Hulu special necessarily, is the night before there were hundreds, dozens, if you want to you don't want to oversell it, dozens and dozens of people from the community out, and law enforcement and fire department folk out walking around the trails and walking in the woods. And one thing that we learned from the fire chief was that the fire people were concerned, and a lot of other people, that the girls had fallen in off the bridge into the creek, or were in the creek. So what fire men did, they went along the bank. This is important. They went along the bank with their flashlights. Okay. And again, this is not very far from where the girls were found, and where that clothing in the river was found is not very far from the bridge. And nobody on the night of the 13th, that's when the girls were abducted, February the 13th, it's a Monday. Nobody on Monday, February 13th, who was walking along the banks of the river with their flashlights said, "Oh my gosh, there's clothing over there." And it's one of many reasons why we, the defense, believe the girls were not there on the 13th of February. They were brought there later. And a large part of that is got to do with the phone data off of Libby's phone. So let me finish what police walked into. So some people saw these clothing items. Then they walked up and they saw the image, the girls on the ground. And it was a very unsettling, is a very generous way to say it. It was a very upsetting scene. These two girls, Libby was naked next to a tree, and she had been posed. Okay. That's not my words. It looked that way to Nicole Robertson, who was an FBI agent. She believed that those bodies had been posed, and particularly Libby. And and the girls were kind of at almost a 30-degree angle from one another. And on Abby was a formation of sticks. It looked like it had been formed. There was, I believe, 3 sticks or branches that had been, somebody had taken sticks and formed in a certain way. And the same on Libby. There were two branches, for example, going up that somebody had taken and placed these things in a very particular manner. And along her legs, where her genitals were, they went up. And you saw this if you watch the Hulu special, they did a really great job. I don't know where they got this, but I was glad they were able to get the when we were in trial, I was surprised to see that there was a depiction of the sticks on the girls
Yeah.
that somebody had done. I don't remember ever getting that in Discovery. I'm not saying that we didn't get it. There was a million things in Discovery, but I was happy that that was there. And the Hulu people got it as an exhibit. Apparently, one of the things that Judge Gold must have released, and they put that up on the screen, and you can see the configuration of sticks. Okay, and so that's what police, they're looking at this situation, and they had to be thinking, what is going on here? Because it was obviously not trying to hide the girls. These sticks were placed on there in a very intentional way. It looked like to police early on, day one, like it was some type of satanic cult, or somebody threw out the phrase Odinism, that this was Odinites. And that's a Norse pagan religion that uses a thing called runes as their symbols. If you want to call it an alphabet. Runes are Germanic in nature. Germanic runic script would be all these kind of weird symbols, and you can see them like in the movie. There was this bizarre movie, Midsummer. Okay,
yeah.
Some people may have watched that, and you can see some people are wearing, because it's in Sweden, and they're wearing. You can see some runes there, and some movies you'll just see them there. In fact, there's been some movies. I think it was in one of the episodes, the first True Detective. I think there were runes involved in that, but it looked like that to such a degree to the police that they wanted to investigate certain people and that belief system and see, is this real? Is it possible? This was not a figment of my imagination. It's not something that I created. We got this right out of their police reports and so forth. And so they had these sticks on the girls. And then on the tree, there was, in Libby's blood, it looked like there had been an F, or it kind of looked like a downward, it looked like another rune, a Fehu rune, or this is what some people thought. And let me just tell you, there's no question. They had a blood spatter guy at trial who said, no, that's Libby's blood spat. It wasn't. Anybody that watched that had half a brain would know that was intentionally placed on there by somebody. In 17 minutes, they was going to say Richard Allen did all of this stuff all by himself. And because he was freaked out, by the way, let's throw that into the mix, right? So they're trying to say that he was freaked out about getting caught doing something. So what does he do? He takes the girls across the creek and then spends, and then does all this stuff in a short period of time, rather than just get the heck out of there and go straight up. On the other side, I've been there, you can go straight up, and there's a cemetery at the top of the hill, and you can just be on your merry way and get on the road. But they're trying to sell this story. The prosecution was that Richard Allen was scared of a van, then did all this stuff in 17 minutes, then went up on a road, which is, I don't want to say it's heavily traveled, but it's traveled for sure. And then he just walked, after he just killed these girls, he's walking along the road with a bloody, it just none of it made sense.
Right.
And the story did not work. And here's one of the reasons it didn't work. Here's the last thing I'm going to say about the crime scene for now. That's super, super important. The underneath Abby's body, under her back, was a shoe, a Converse shoe, and under the shoe was a phone. It was Libby's phone. And that's the phone from whence the famous video, Down the Hill video, came. All right. So that's phone shows some very important data and information that absolutely shows that Richard Allen did not commit this crime. And sadly, there's a guy named Detective Cecil, Chris Cecil, who was in charge of the forensic data, and a guy named Brian Bunner as well. And I really like Chris Cecil. I didn't really have a whole lot to say about Bunner. He was fine, I guess. But Cecil struck me as a real honest guy, and I still to this day think he's a real honest guy. And Cecil did not, unfortunately, know how to review and read the Celebrite extraction, the gray key extraction, the variety, and what I'm talking about, folks, that don't know, are when you have a phone, there's software that can extract data, and then it puts it into a format that you can read, but you have to know how to read it. And what Detective Cecil did not see was some incredibly important data that appeared at trial, and we knew that they didn't know it going into trial, but we did not trust prosecution. We did not trust police to alert them to this. We did alert them to the 4:33 a.m. So let me tell you what this all means, okay? Try not to get into the weeds. According to the state's theory, that phone stopped moving at, I think it was 2:33 a.m. or p.m., 2:33 p.m. So 2:13 is when they are abducted. By 2:33 p.m., I might be off a minute or two. This was Jennifer Auger's area, but I knew it very well. By 2:33 p.m., they're claiming Richard Allen had done everything that I just described. Took the clothes off, the sticks, arranged the sticks on the girls, the clothing out in the creek, maybe washed Abby's hands, all of this in 17 minutes. And by 2:33, that phone was under Abby's body. And the state's theory is that that phone remained, this is important, remained under Abby's body from 2:33 p.m. on the 13th of February, all the way until the police found the girls around 11:30, 12 o'clock on the 14th of February, Tuesday, the next day. That phone, according to the police, was under, and according to the prosecutor, under Abby's body that entire time. Let's test that out. Let's see if that makes sense with other things that we know. All right. Here's one thing that we know. That phone was being pinged every 15 minutes. Here's what that is. When you have a ping, you can ask for what's called an exigency circumstance ping. I have a hard time saying that. And what that is you call AT&T and you say, hey, we got somebody that's missing. Can you tell us where they are or where the phone is? And so they were pinging on on Libby's phone, and it pinged all the way up until I believe it was 5:45 p.m. on the 13th. Okay. And what that means is that phone is in the area. All right. That phone is in the area. They weren't able to exactly pinpoint where it was, but it was within the area. Then at 5:45 p.m., there's no more pings. There's no more pings. Now, under the state's theory, this phone, why is it not pinging? If it was pinging all the way up until 5:45 p.m. and it's remained in the same place, why would it stop pinging? Okay, well, you think maybe there was a guy named Brian Blocker who was asked that question. He's since deceased, but he put out a report. I call it the Blocker report. And in it, he said that what probably happened is the phone either is no longer working or it was taken out of the area. Okay. Those are the two options that Brian Blocker said. No longer working, and that's why it's not being pinged, or it's no longer in the area. Well, when they recovered the phone, guess what? It was working. So it wasn't that it wasn't working. So that's option one. What's option two? It wasn't in the area, right? So to make it even more interesting, and I haven't even got to the blockbuster yet, but to make it even more interesting, at 4:33 a.m., the phone starts pinging again. Okay? It hadn't pinged for whatever, almost 12 hours. And all of a sudden, it starts pinging again. And all these messages that had been out in the ethosphere waiting for this phone to connect to the tower matriculated on to the phone. What that means is that phone was not in the area of the tower at from 5:45 p.m. until 4:33 a.m. I don't know that it's that complicated, but it is kind of complicated to explain to a jury. And I haven't even got to the best part yet. So think about that. Just think about that for a second. That's important, because what that really means is that likely what happened is that phone was not around the area, and it was brought back. And then at 4:33 a.m., it reconnected to the tower, and that's when the girls came. And that's the girls weren't there. That's why nobody in the parties, the firemen, and all the citizens that were out there, that's why they didn't see the girls that night, because they weren't there. That's why. Well, then add this fact, and this is what was the mind blower for the prosecution at trial. This is something that Detective Cecil, again, a very nice guy, he did not find this information out. We hired an expert who was a former FBI agent named Stacy Eldridge. Okay. Stacy, brilliant. She understands how to look at the data. It's sad, and I don't want to rip onto Cecil too much, but it's sad that they did not send this data to the best. There was a rift with the FBI in this case, everybody. And the FBI probably would have had better people to look at this, I'm guessing. But instead, they were, as Jerry Holman said, and Jerry Holman was the lead detective on this case. He's a state trooper. Jerry Holman gleefully told me in a deposition that Doug Carter, the superintendent of police, the top dog in the state, kicked off the FBI. Okay. Then that later was kind of backtracked. Okay. But anyway, the FBI didn't look at this data. Otherwise, they might have found out what we, through our own former FBI agent, Stacy Eldridge, what she found. And what she found is this. At 5:44 p.m. on the 13th, that's the Tuesday, at 5:44 p.m., somebody plugged in headphones into that Apple 6. Headphones in, 5:44 p.m. Okay. Now, that's right within a minute or so of when the last ping happened. So I'm not really sure. We had some theories on why that was, and other people may have them as well. Okay. Well, let's think about the state's theory with that information, right? This phone is under Abby Williams's body from 2:33 p.m. until the next day at 11 a.m. on the 14th. That's their theory. What the heck is somebody reaching under the body and putting on headphones? No, it's likely because we know that it stopped pinging at 5:45 and it got and the phone was captured by the tower again at 4:33 a.m. the next morning. It connected to the tower again. We know that the phone, and what makes the most sense by far, is that the phone wasn't there, and that at 5:44, when somebody plugged the headphone in, that the phone was somewhere else, okay, or it was on its way to be somewhere else. Then what we learned is that the headphone, or the phone, Libby's phone, headphone out at 10:32 p.m. Okay, these are human hands that are doing this. This is not something that can be replicated by a squirrel running, or Abby's body shifting because of the wind or anything like that. It has to be hands in using and hands out. Okay, and
let me jump in real quick right there, just
Please.
so in a couple of things. We interviewed Stacy here, and I highly suggest that everybody go watch that interview. In terms of, she was able to discuss at length what she discovered. Go back into our playlist of Delphi trial. We had her on for an hour and a half, and she is brilliant, and she knows her stuff. So the problem with Cecil is he was out of his depth.
Yes,
I agree with you. I don't think that he's a shady character. I don't think that he came in there trying to lie. I don't think that he was, in any way, shape, or form trying to put evidence into evidence that was cooked up. I just think he was out of his depth. He was out of his element. He admitted that he was still training and learning things as he was sitting there at trial. I mean, he was very honest about he was continuing his education because he wanted to learn more. And when Jennifer was able to cross him, he was taken aback by this information that Stacy had discovered. And, the way that this played out at trial is that there was a 15-minute break. So Gull, after this comes out, and if you guys remember, this case This happened in 2017, an iPhone 6. That was back in the days when they used to have an aux port, the thing that you would stick an aux cord in, or you'd plug in your headphones, in order to listen. So iPhones don't have that anymore. So you'd have to go back and maybe Google an old iPhone to understand what we're talking about. But this aux port is there. So they take this 15-minute break. Cecil, I don't even know if Cecil was on the stand anymore. I think Eldridge had come on, and then you could
what
see
happened, Bob, was Jennifer. I kind of remember this. So, I'll set it up for you, and then you can, because I know what you're going to get at, and I want to give you that opportunity because it's so ridiculous, and I want you to have the ability to kind of riff on that. But I knew what was coming down. Like, I knew what was happening, and I was looking right at Jerry Holman when this was happening because I knew that they had no idea. And it's so sad, by the way, that they didn't know. And it's so sad that we could not go to them and say, how do you not know that? But there's no way that we could trust them. No way. And I knew what was going down, and I knew the ebbs and the flow of Jennifer's direct of Stacey Eldridge, and I knew when the big bomb was going to hit. And Matt Hoffman actually knows it because he wrote it down. It was like 3:06 p.m. on whatever the day was, and that's when Stacey Eldridge said, "Headphones in, headphones out." She showed it on the screen. She showed, what, it was obvious. They had failed to move. It's kind of simple to say how they missed it. You had to move over like 500. It's kind of like a big grid, and they had failed to go over far enough to see this. And I looked over at Holman, and he was like, "Oh crap," And so then we made a strategic decision. I think I'm remembering this correctly. This was a big talk between Brad and me and Jennifer. The big talk was, and I think I also have to say, I think I was the advocate for this, and I made a lot of bad tactical decisions. This is probably one of the better ones. And that was, I pushed to put Cecil right after Eldridge. And that's so that they did not have a chance, to commiserate Cecil and Bunner and the prosecution and Holman and all those guys. So we put Cecil, the state trooper in charge of the phone data, right after our expert got off. And
this is close to the end of the court day, which is important. Because it could have been that Gull would have ended the day, which would have given them all night to try to come up with some kind of explanation as to how this might have happened, other than somebody plugging in an aux cord. I just wanted to
let me explain why it's important if it's not obvious. Their theory again is that Richard Allen killed those girls, left the scene at 2:33 p.m. and never came back. And I made sure when we learned this information, man, I did another round of depositions, and I was like just kind of gently caressing around the edges of, what right questions to ask. And one of the questions that I ultimately asked was, you guys aren't saying that Richard Allen ever came back? Because I was trying to think, what are they going to say? Well, he came back at 5:44 and plugged in headphones, and he came back out at 10:32. I mean, that's a possibility. It's as cockamamie as a bunch of other stuff that they talked about. So I wanted to make sure that I had their feet in concrete, that Richard Allen, never came back. And once they agreed to that, then who did come back and plug in the headphone or take it out? Of course, we know that the phone wasn't there. That's what happened. But we're trying to envision how they're going to extricate themselves from this major problem. So when Cecil gets on, Jennifer just did such a great job of it's awkward because you're kind of crossing him, but it's your own witness. Right. So she's direct crossing him.
Right.
And, with Judge Gall, that's fraught with all kinds of disaster where she could have, stopped and did, but Jennifer did such a great job. And you know what, Cecil, to his credit, man, again, I think Jennifer and I shared with him the 4:33 a.m. problem way back a few months prior. And we just had a hunch that he was that it would be okay to do that to him and give him that information. And to his credit, I don't think that he went and tried to solve the problem of the 4:33 a.m. There was really nothing they could do about that. They had to have some theories and stuff, but Cecil gets on the stand, and to his credit, man, I think he just looked at it and said, he didn't say it this way, but it's like, Yeah, I missed that. You know, he didn't say that, but there was nothing he couldn't say. What he couldn't say is she's wrong. She's reading the data wrong.
Right.
He couldn't say that.
No.
So now they're in trouble because their theory is blown apart because at 5:44 p.m. somebody plugged in headphones, and at 10:32 somebody unplugged those phones, and it wasn't Richard Allen. Who was it? It was maybe the girls, maybe the one of the killers involved in the case, but they had some explaining to do.
What he did say, Andy, is I don't know what it meant. I didn't understand what it meant.
That's right. That's what he said.
You know,
he claims that he did see it. I will take him at his word, but I didn't know what it meant. And how sad is that? We're talking about, you know, even though it's not that necessarily that it's a high profile case, but you would think that you're going to do your best. And, you know, leadership starts at the top. Jerry Holman was in charge of that investigation. He should have, you know, known that Cecil is not the man for this task. Somebody else is the man. I don't blame Cecil. Cecil did what he was asked to do. I blame Jerry Holman wholeheartedly. He claims to be in charge of this, one of the big guns in charge of this. Why did you, instead of bragging about getting the FBI off, how about, you know, sending an olive branch to them for whatever the problem was, which I know all about that too, and I'm not going to get sidetracked with that. But how about going to you finding Stacey Eldridge? How about that? And going and saying, tell me what you know about this. So that was a major problem for them, and they knew it, and I've set you up. So now Cecil gets off. They took a break, and I think it was like a bathroom break or something.
Yeah,
it wasn't
15-minute bathroom break.
It was very convenient, you know, as they're getting pummeled, and Jennifer is just, I mean, she's just throwing haymakers in this. And then they go on break, and what happens?
So at that point,
this actually happened, by the way. What Bob is about to say is not a story. This actually happened at trial. Go ahead. We're not making this up.
So they take the break and they come back, and I think what happens, and I can't remember, did Jennifer recall him, or was he released from the stand, or who did they call up? I think it was Cecil.
Well, I think Bunner got up. I think we did both of those guys. Just we wanted them on record saying that, you know, Stacey's analysis is correct, and I think that's what happened.
No, I'm talking about after the break, because after the break,
Cecil.
So Cecil gets back up,
yeah,
and Jennifer is again, like, you know, direct crossing him, and she asks him, you know, do you have any kind of answer for that as to what had happened with this port? I mean, it doesn't seem you would agree with what you're seeing up here. We've told you what it means. Do you have any explanation for what could have happened? And he says, well, during the break, I Googled it, and I found an Apple forum. And in that Apple forum, it said that either water or dirt could cause that to trigger, give kind of a false positive reading that port had been activated. And so Jennifer, and you're sitting there as an attorney in the gallery, and his attorney's sitting up at counsel table, and you're just kind of blown away with this concept. And lawyers have to think on their feet when you have something happen like that. Jennifer's standing there. She probably thought that he might go and try to look something up real quickly during that break, but wasn't anticipating that he'd come up with this ridiculous answer. So she just tears into him about, are you saying that in the years that you've had this case, and we're talking 7 years, and you've had this information, that this is what you've done, this is what your investigation is, it's amounted to a Google search during a 15-minute break, and this is the answer that you've come up with, that either dirt or water getting into that port could have caused this
from an Apple chat group.
From an Apple chat group.
Yeah.
Okay, like a forum where people just get on there, and there's people, self-proclaimed experts, who are like, oh yeah, maybe dirt or. The problem for Cecil is it doesn't explain the concept of how the port is disengaged, because water's not drying, and dirt under no circumstances is working its way out of the port. If dirt got up into the port, it's going to remain in the port. So and it just kind of like ended with that. And it was so, because it was, for me, when I learned about that evidence during that day, when you guys put it out there, I was blown away. I thought it was case over.
Yeah.
Because what you had here is a situation where they arrested somebody without having looked at all of the evidence, because they had extracted the phone very, very early on. So I think the first extraction, correct me if I'm wrong, was on the 15th. So I'm talking about a couple of days after the crime took place. That was the very first extraction. And then Cecil did his, because during the course of the investigation, Cellubrite had improved their product and they would do updates. Yeah. And so there was this battle from the defense trying to get his report based on the most recent update that Cellubrite had done, or Gray Key, but I believe he was using Cellubrite still. And the defense was arguing, well, we need this. We're like on the eve of trial here. Yeah. When is this guy going to get us his report?
Yeah, think about that, everybody. I mean, they've had this case since, they've had that phone since 2017, and we're now in 2024, and they're still giving us evidence. I mean, like leading up to the trial, and even during the trial, they tested a hair that was found on Abby's hand because I called them out on it. And they tested it while the trial was going on.
Crazy. It was crazy.
It's the most insane thing. And Bob, I mean, I don't know that the new people that don't know about this case can really appreciate and understand what we just talked about. This is what we just talked about. And I think we objected to this Google search. Yeah. I'd have to read the transcript. What's interesting about that is if we did object and Judge Gull let that in, remember on the Allison Davis murder case that we won back in May in front of Judge Gull after the Delphi case, we had experts get on the stand and who said, Allison, there was exonerating evidence that shows that she did not kill her husband. She was asleep. It was a garment on her wrist. And we had the foremost expert in the world, Dr. Diaz, come in from Columbia University and say, yeah, this thing's reliable. And he testified, and a guy from Purdue testified. And the state did not put on one person, and the judge excluded that evidence with zero written explanation at all. Okay, now think about that. And now think, if we did object to the Google search, it's like, Judge, you can't that's hearsay and all kinds of
hearsay
problems. And somebody check out the transcript. But if she let that in and said overruled, and now compare that to exonerating evidence in a different murder case, which thankfully, again, we won, but without the benefit of this Garmin data that the judge, excluded because of whatever, but they're allowed to put in a Google search. Think about how insane that is, everybody. I mean, it's totally, they went into huddled up in a room, and they're like, oh, Mike, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do, oh my gosh. Oh, hey, there's a chat room here from Apple. Oh, hey, what does it say? Well, some guy says this. That's what these two girls' lives, that's what it comes down to.
Right.
They're not searching for the truth. What they should have said. This is what good prosecutors should have done. And even maybe a judge. This is pretty powerful discovery that you guys, about this 544 in and 1032 out. It really destroys the case. I'm a prosecutor. I want to get to the truth. Man, if this shows that Richard Allen is not guilty, can we take a break? I need a day. Give me a day. Let this jury go off for a day. Let us go to experts, and let's see if we can explain it in some other way than a Google search.
Right.
And that's not
which had no foundation laid, no authentication laid. Jennifer definitely objected to it. Gull allowed it in over objection. And, but to your point, even going before that, like, the fact of the matter is that they arrested a guy not knowing all the information based on mere presence in this unspent casing, because that's what it amounted to, and it put them, in my opinion, in a position when you have a case that has that kind of evidence, which I consider to be incredibly weak going in. You know that they're needing more evidence, or they need confessions, which leads into that whole conversation of what ends up happening to Richard Allen, wherein he's transported into the most secure hellhole that exists in the state of Indiana, and he's in the most secure cell in that hellhole for 13 months by himself in solitary confinement. But we'll get there.
Yeah,
but
away from his wife of 30 plus years, ripped out of his house, getting yelled at in front by Holman, and then whisked away, and then through some real questionable legal maneuvering, he ends up in Westville prison. That's another thing that the documentary didn't talk about, and maybe we're skipping ahead there, but they do talk about him being
there. Don't even
go there. We'll get there.
So
the Google search, apparently that didn't matter to the jury. I don't understand how that's not reasonable doubt. I don't want to question the jury, but man, I would like to know, did the dirt 15-minute Google search from an Apple whatever that you call them, where these people are talking on an Apple chat group or whatever, that's not reasonable doubt. It's embarrassing the way that was handled. It's shameful that it was allowed to be handled that way. And it's kind of a mind blower. I still to this day can't even believe that actually happened.
Well, during your opening, you would ask the jury for one thing, and that was to wait. And you pointed out another thing that was going to happen that absolutely did happen, which was that the state in the middle of the trial was going to have to change their theory of the case, which they did. Yep. I mean, you knew what the evidence was, and the only way that I could think of it is that by the time that you guys got to that, in terms of what the verdict ended up being, is that they didn't wait, that they had already come to a conclusion, because to ignore that type of evidence, which absolutely destroys their timeline, because that was over here on my channel, I'm well known, attack the timeline. And that's exactly what you guys did, and what you were able to produce through the most qualified expert you could imagine. Like, Stacy is beyond reproach. She trains feds. She knows her stuff. The woman is just unimpeachable, and she puts it out there, and it just seemed like it fell on deaf ears, which just blew me away. Like the people from, the position of, all right, this guy, nothing fits about this case. We're talking about a guy, like you said, married 35 years, raised his daughter. She's made it through college. She's married and having her own family.
Never been in trouble.
Zero background, no criminal history whatsoever. Was in the National Guard. I mean, the guy, by all accounts, he's just, there's no red flags that you see typically when you find somebody who's committed a horrific crime like this against two little girls. Like people just don't decide out of thin air one day after leaving their mother's house, you know what? I'm going to go out to the trail after I've left my mom's house at 11 o'clock. And I think I'm going to go kill a couple of girls in broad daylight after a bunch of people have seen me. And then, I'm going to roll with it. And then I'm going to go home and I'm going to take a nap on the couch. Like that is just not how this thing works. And when you guys were able to put out evidence in terms, because look, you guys were left with only having to do what any lawyer would tell you is really the last resort, which is just to rely on reasonable doubt, where you're poking. But you guys did more than that. It wasn't just poking holes in the state's case. You guys were actually able to produce evidence, again, from the evidence that was tendered by the state to the defense, that showed that their timeline was wrong, that there was something horribly, horribly wrong about their timeline, and they had no explanation for it. And they were some way able to gloss it over with a Google search in a 15-minute break that seemed to have zero impact on the jury. And I'll never know why. I think one juror did an interview on one channel, and I desperately wanted one. And this juror was talking about Rick Allen's eyes. Rick Allen's eyes. I'm like, oh, okay. It's talk about the evidence. And what, Brad seemed like a mean guy. I was afraid of Brad. I'm like, okay, none of that has anything to do with the facts and the evidence that were presented to you
544 in, 1032 out.
How do you
544 in.
explain it?
I said that during trial prep, whenever we were feeling up because of the confessions and we're feeling down, that's what I'd say. Ask Jennifer. She probably wanted to punch me. Jennifer, 544 in, 1032 out. 544 in, 1032 out. There's nothing that they can do about that. Nothing.
There's nothing. There's no answer to it.
And it destroyed their timeline. That phone was somewhere else. Those girls were somewhere else. All of the evidence shows that. It's not even, it's not just beyond a reasonable doubt that,
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
you definitively destroyed the timeline with the phone.
And on top of that, though, another way to destroy the timeline was that nobody saw Richard Allen. That was another thing they didn't really focus on in the Hulu special. The girls that were on the trail, there were girls on the state was saying that these 4 girls, there's not 3. They say that there's 3, but there's really 4, and they did that. The state did kind of trickily. I understand why, because Richard said that he saw when he was on the trail between noon and 1:30 p.m. he saw 3 girls. Well, 4 girls say that they saw a guy walking toward the bridge. Okay, 4 girls, and they described a guy that was about 5'11", and that was the main thing. But nothing else really matched Richard Allen. And certainly the height didn't match Richard Allen, because
Richard Allen's 5'5". Just
if you're new to the case, Richard Allen's very tiny shoes. That's the very first thing I really noticed of Rick when we were in the thing is I looked down and I'm like, oh my gosh, he's got the smallest feet that I've ever seen.
I've told this story a million times, Andy. The first time when I came down, and it was for the original safekeeping hearing, and that was in Carroll County, and they brought Rick out from back, and I had never seen him in real life, in actuality, and I'd seen him you can't tell anything about somebody's size when you're watching clips. When I turned around and I laid eyes, when I heard the door back, because I knew they were bringing him back and bringing him into the courtroom, it literally took my breath away. I could not believe how little this guy was. Now, granted, at that point, he'd probably lost at least 100 pounds. That mattered not. It was his height. He was one of those people that if you were to describe, if like, hey, you're going to meet my friend out tonight, they're going to beat me there. And if I were to describe him, the first descriptor, I'd say he's a really short guy. That not one witness.
Yes.
Out of everybody that claims that they saw anybody out that day, said that the guy was really short. He was like a really short guy. Like, I mean, because it's that evident in terms of it would be the number one thing. That drove me nuts.
I think that the way you just described that, Bob, is it just such a simple. I love going into court and being simple. One thing is when people have told one story and then they told a different story, and you could call them liars. I just say they couldn't keep their story straight. It's a simple way to say it. And what you just said is a simple way. Not one person ever said they saw a short guy on the trail or on the bridge. Betsy Blair was another great witness for us. The state's desperate for Betsy to have seen Richard Allen on the bridge. And for those who are new to the Delphi case, Betsy Blair, before the girls arrived to the scene to go on the bridge, there's a claim that Betsy Blair saw Richard Allen on the bridge on this little platform, and that she locked eyes with him. Okay. The guy. And so that was the front bookend, if you will, of they say, oh, well, this was before Richard Allen killed the girls and abducted them. The girls went past him and then he followed them. And Betsy Blair saw Richard Allen before the girls even got to the trail. She arrived minutes before Abby and Libby did, when Kelsey dropped them off. So it's the order of events is, if it's hard to follow, is Betsy Blair parks at this little, we call it the mirrors entrance. She goes down and then she goes to the bridge, and she claims that she saw, and I don't have any reason to doubt her, she saw a guy on the bridge. Then she turned around and she was headed back this way. And that's when Abby and Libby passed her, and they're on their way to the bridge. And so if who Betsy Blair saw on the bridge was Richard Allen, then the state's theory was that the girls got onto the bridge. They would have passed Richard. on the bridge, and then he would have followed them. And there's many problems with that theory. One of them I really want to get into in a minute. It's about the 207 photo, which is on the documentary, by the way. Yeah. But another problem with that theory is Betsy Blair did not see Richard Allen. She saw a 20-year-old kid with brown poofy hair, and that's what she described to Sheriff Tony Liggett, who was not the sheriff at the time, but he was the sheriff at the time of Rick's arrest.
So that, if you're familiar with the case, you obviously know that. So when they dropped this second composite, back in 2019, so after they've had this composite of a guy, an older guy with jowls, where like he's got a kind of like a gruff, scruffy beard, and you've got, all of a sudden they decide, you know what, we have this different description.
Let's see. And
this is who we think Bridge Guy is. So that's the first one that comes out initially. So that's based on Sarah Carbaugh, who, if you read the transcripts, and eventually Allie and I are going to get to that entire direct and cross-examination, because it was one of the most bizarre I've ever seen ever. I could not get a grasp of that girl and where her head was. But so then in 2019, this is the next composite that comes out, that they are saying that this is Bridge Guy. So that's who Betsy Blair saw.
Yeah, and that's who she saw, and it looks nothing like Richard Allen. Now, what's funny is in Under Oath, Jerry Holman, those two photos that I just saw, Jerry Holman said those two look alike. And he said they look alike so much. They look more, if you watch the Hulu special, there's a really great, one really great moment for me that I really, really liked was one of the third-party suspects named Brad Holder, and they get onto his Facebook post and they show these runes and Odinism, symbols that are on all over his Facebook page, and a bunch of other stuff that's really, you just have to watch it. But one of them is the stick formation that was on Abby, which we think, and I'm certain was a rune. Brad Holder, and who is he? His son dated Abby. Brad Holder's son dated Abby. Now I thought that the podcasters, the prosecution guys, got the people that were on the show, they did a pretty good job. But one thing that was a little irritating is that the guy, whatever his name is, he said, oh, well, the Brad Holder, his son was a friend of Abby's, and that's what he said. No, it was that there's a difference. Now, my son has lots of friends who are girls, but I know who his girlfriend is. Okay. Right. I've met his girlfriends. Right. So to say that it was a little disingenuous, in my opinion. I know they're prosecutors, and, maybe it was unintentional, but Abby dated, or whatever you want to call it in those days. They had interest, romantic interest in one another, even at that young age, but not anything lurid or anything, but just like, guys, hey, I'm going with him. And even at the funeral, Logan Holder, Brad's son, told Anna, Abby's mom, this was my girlfriend. And then Brad in the deposition, Anna said Brad Holder told him to kind of be quiet after that. So they were boyfriend and girlfriend. And so there's a direct connection. That's one of the reasons he's a third-party suspect. And on his wrist, about 5 weeks after the girls were found, he takes a photograph, and he had taken an ink pen, and he had put like this symbol on there, and he took a photo of it. Well, you can't see it, but you see it on the Hulu special, and they take that symbol on that rune on his wrist, and they take it and they transpose it right on top of the stick formation from the sketch of the sticks on Abby, and it's almost a dead ringer. Okay, in other words, and I'm not really explaining this well, but what was on his wrist, the father of the boyfriend of Abby, was the stick formation that matched Abby's, the sticks on Abby. Okay, I mean, that's a pretty big deal, right? and I don't remember how we got stumbled upon that topic, but I know what it was. So I'm in a deposition. Okay, listen to this. This is so ridiculous. Jerry Holman had to be, and so in on Richard Allen. He, in my opinion, he was not willing to look for the truth of what actually might have happened, because they have arrested him. He is charged with a crime, and that's it, you know? And so I asked him, you've seen this thing on his, and you've seen the stick formation on Abby. They look alike. And he's like, nah, that's a stretch. No. And I said, oh, really? So sketch 1 and sketch 2, the ones that I just showed you, which look more alike, this and the stick formation, or sketch 1 and sketch 2? And he said, sketch 1 and sketch 2. They look more alike than the stick formation. I mean, it's a joke.
It's just disingenuous.
It's so ridiculous. Nobody in their right mind would ever say that. Those two, and then by the way, the sketches, there's always a debate whether it was the same person or not. And the state police, I believe, we have somebody, one of the great, probably somebody listening here, had sent me it was some type of an announcement that from the state police that was either on their webpage or something they sent out that said, there's a lot of confusion about whether sketch 1 and sketch 2 are the same guy or not. They aren't. Okay. But then by the time they get to trial, they are, because they had to be, because it helped their case out. I mean, this is the kind of chaos that we're dealing with on this case. So Betsy Blair, to put a button on that, she did not see Richard Allen. And when she left the trails, she got in her car and she drove right past a vehicle that police said was Richard Allen's vehicle, because their theory was, and claim was, Richard Allen parked in this certain parking lot, left at 1:30ish, and was gone until 4 o'clock. So from 1:30 to 4, this car, according to police, stayed in this parking lot. And it was the only car in this parking lot, right? And it's Richard drove, Rick and his wife drove a couple different cars. Mercury 500 I'm not a car guy.
One was a Ford 500 and a Ford Focus. And the way that Rick told it, and I highly recommend that everybody watch the 2 interrogations of Richard Allen and form your own opinions on those. You don't have to be a lawyer to watch those and get a sense of whether somebody has committed these horrible crimes and is being interrogated for the first time in 5 years, where theoretically, if you've done this, you know, the jig is up, and you just judge on your own. Like, you can just use your common sense and watch both of those interviews. They're very telling in a lot of different ways.
We were excited for that jury to watch those videos. Okay. It was thrilling for us to let them, anyway. Yeah.
There's a Ford Focus, a black Ford Focus, which is what they claim that Richard was driving that day. And that's because they have this Hoosier Harvest store video, which you can see in the Hulu documentary. They showed a couple times. It's probably 2 football fields, maybe more, from where this one little road that runs back there, 300 North, where it catches this vehicle that you cannot tell the make model. It's way too far off. It's very pixelated. You can't see what it is, but they need that to be Rick's car.
Yes. And by the way, it made no sense that Rick he lived near town, and it would have been a 4.5 mile roughly out of his way to drive that way, with the added bonus of getting caught on a camera. Okay. He did not travel. That was not his car, but what they said that it was, and that he parked in this lot from 1:30 to 4. And when Betsy Blair passed that, she said, yeah, I saw a car there. It reminded me of the car that my dad had in the 1960s. It was I can't even think of it now.
Comet. Mercury.
Yeah, a Comet. She said a Mercury Comet or a Ford Comet. She gave the wrong, but she said it was a Comet. It was one of those, you guys all know about, I mean, I'm old, but maybe if you're younger, you may not know this, but those older cars that you see like at car shows and stuff, they're real angular and boxy.
Super distinct. They're like
very, very distinct. Car. Even I, who is a complete car idiot, I get into the wrong car all the time. Like when I go out to lunch with people, I don't pay any attention to what their car they're driving. I'll get in, and the other day, I mean, it wasn't that long ago, I got into this car and I'm just like, oh, there's a guy sitting there. You know, I don't pay attention to cars, but I would know, as Betsy did, that looks like, she had something sentimental about it too. That looks like my dad's car.
Right.
So that is something that they did not put in and that's one of the reasons the Franks memo exists is Liggett, who put the probable cause affidavit for the search warrant together to get into Rick's house with yeah, thank you. There you go. Now put that up with a 2014
Ford Focus.
Ford Focus. Yeah, they don't look alike. And
right.
What's super interesting is Liggett and then the prosecutor, Nick McClelland, on the search warrant affidavit, he said it shows that he approved this probable cause affidavit, which was being used, and it's important to note this probable cause affidavit was being used to enter a citizen's home. Okay. We are free from the government doing that unless there's probable cause. So they wanted to get into Rich. There you go. Thank you. There it is. That really looks
pretty
like
hard to confuse those two vehicles.
A Comet. And by the way, she also said it was neither black or white. It was another nondescript color.
Right.
So there was no way that with the car that Betsy Blair saw. And if you're following along, folks, if Betsy Blair didn't see Richard Allen's car and she saw a different car, then Richard Allen did not kill those girls. Richard Allen was not on the trail. Just another piece of evidence that he was not on the trail. His car, because he was gone. He was gone by that time. He was gone by 1:30. But here's what's, what's upsetting and irritating and all those kind of words is Liggett puts the probable cause affidavit. And what he doesn't say is, hey, Judge, I want to be fair. I want to be fair with you. Betsy Blair saw a guy that looked like he was 20 years old with brown poofy hair, and Richard Allen doesn't have that. And Betsy Blair, she saw a car at the CPS lot that we say was Richard Allen's car, but it wasn't Richard Allen's car. So I don't know, you decide whether you want to give out a search warrant and invade a citizen's home using the power of the government. You go ahead and do that. And that was just the least. And that's what the Franks memo was, by the way. It was built off of Betsy Blair's description of the car and her description of the guy that she saw at the bridge that did not match in any way, shape, or form Richard Allen. And they hid that from the judge. And that's the point of a Franks motion and a memo is that it should be the whole thing, everything that they got from the search, that they should throw all that stuff out because they weren't square. They weren't being honorable. They weren't being honest. And there's other examples of that as well that are contained within. And then the biggest one is the Odinites, that there was a whole other group of people that the police looked into and Liggett didn't say, and by the way, Judge, there's also a whole other group of people that might have been involved in this. I just want you to know everything. Now you could, the prosecutor podcast folk might listen to me say that and say, that's ridiculous. They're never going to put that in there. But if you're being honest, that's what you do. Okay. That's what you do, especially about the Betsy Blair. I mean, it's debatable about the Odin stuff. I could listen, I'll debate that. I'd like to debate that, but I could lose that debate, but I'm not going to lose the Betsy Blair debate.
No,
I'm not going to lose the Betsy Blair debate and what Liggett with McClelland's approval did not put in there. It was inaccurate. And by the way, he also inaccurately detailed what Sarah Carbaugh said. Sarah Carbaugh, I look forward to when you do that direct and cross. I'd like to be, I'd like to watch that.
Yeah. I'll let you know.
I'd like to watch you do that. But Sarah, was an interesting person. And when she's first talked to by the police, now for those who don't know, this is the second bookend. This is at the very tail end. They're claiming that Sarah Carbaugh saw Richard Allen walking along 300 North on his way to get his car. Okay. After he's killed the girls. That's what that is. So Betsy Blair saw at the front before he abducted the girls is what the state says. And Sarah Carbaugh saw it after he'd gone up the hill and he's walking down. And Sarah Carbaugh, when she talked to the police originally, I believe it was in April of 2017, a few months later, maybe it was June, she said that she saw a muddy guy walking down the road. A muddy guy. Never mentions blood.
And this is months months after.
Yes, months after.
She had this whole bizarre explanation of how she finally, she had PTSD, and which I'm not doubting that may have occurred to her, but she had this bizarre explanation as to why she waited for months, and she had to build up the courage to go and finally make some kind of statement to law enforcement.
My wife just texted me, and she's very passionate about this case, as you can imagine. And she said, when it relates to Brad Holder and the significance of the thing that was on his hand, as well as the other things that you see on the Hulu special, nobody knew what the crime scene looked like. Good job, Michelle. That's important for everybody to know. It's not like the Franks memo had already been out and he knew what was in the crime scene, or there were legal documents out or anything like that. For him to have that on there, that's significant because nobody knew what the crime scene looked like.
No one.
He also had, as you see on the Hulu special, he had an image on his Facebook page of two girls on a forest floor with sticks and branches on them. One of them posed very similarly to Libby.
Now, Bob, you probably have one. You're underselling it because it really was mimicking the crime scene. He had two women or girls that looked like they were deceased.
Yes,
laying on the forest floor with the sticks, like the large.
Yeah, the sticks didn't match.
I would call what was on Libby a limb. It wasn't it was a very long, thick tree limb that was on her side. That was in the pictures are stunning. It's like when you sit there and you're watching the judge look through these pictures, and for her to like be able to sit there in good conscience and say, yeah, I don't see what you're seeing here. It's sad. It's sad for the judicial system. It's sad for somebody who's sitting on this case. It's sad for the search for the truth. Yeah. And again, I get where we're at in our society these days, that the truth and justice do not necessarily intersect. And it certainly doesn't happen as much as it should. But it's just being intellectually dishonest when you're looking at those two things. And you look at, like you said, the timing of it. The timing of it is what mattered. The timing of those posts by him is what made it significant. Because it predated everything that came out about any information, because there had been a lot of speculation about what had happened to the girls at that crime scene leading up to the arrest, but no one knew. And there's certainly nothing had come out in terms of what that scene looked like until the Franks memo dropped. So for her to ignore these just spooky coincidences, if you want to call them that, between what the crime scene looked like and what he was posting, and to ignore it, I don't know.
He had a fascination with sticks and forming the sticks into runes, and it's all over his Facebook page. Okay,
self-proclaimed rune guy.
So sticks in the form of runes all over his Facebook page, and that didn't mean anything to anybody. And all you folks on the other side that might be watching, can you be intellectually honest and say that should have been allowed into evidence?
Let the jury decide. Let the jury decide if they think it's nonsense.
You add this fact, and now we're in full freestyle mode. By the way, I see that.
We're all in.
But, now you add this, and Elvis Fields was not mentioned in the documentary, and he's a huge part of the defense. Okay, so who is Elvis Fields? Elvis Fields. Let me see if I have the document. I mean, I have it memorized, but Elvis Fields is a guy that lives in Rushville, Indiana. Okay, Delphi is up here in Logansport. They're right near each other, and 125 miles away, southeast of Delphi, is a little town called Rushville, Indiana, in Rush County. And soon after the girls were murdered, a man named Elvis Fields went to his sister and said, I was involved. I'm now part of a gang. I have some new brothers. I was involved in killing these girls. And he gave a lot of detailed information about what he did and what he says that he did, at least. And they tried, the sister and her husband tried to get the police to do something about it. And for whatever reason, and I'll be generous again, there was a lot of chaos going on in the early days of that investigation, and maybe their phone call just got overlooked. At some point in time, she and her husband, the sister and Elvis's sister and husband, drove to Delphi and let them know that, hey, my brother gave me some details and here's what he said. So that did start an investigation down in Rushville, Indiana. Okay. And when that investigation started, some very, very good and decent human beings and very good law enforcement officers named Todd Click, Kevin Murphy, and Greg Ferenczi. 3 guys. Now, their names were not mentioned in the Hulu special, and that's unfortunate. And again, I understand they had only so much time. Those 3 guys, and this is what I hope you knew. This is important stuff, new viewers to the Delphi case. These 3 detectives, 3 law enforcement officers, they embarked on an investigation of the Odinist angle, and it was really kind of placed down in Rushville. And so they went balls to the wall. I mean, they were hardcore, just turning over everything they could find. And Kevin Murphy put together a 12-page report that summed up really recorded the investigation as it was going on. Okay. And one thing that when they went down there, they brought Elvis Fields in for an interrogation. And let me tell you, what they weren't doing with Elvis Fields was Jerry Holman pounding his fist like he did in interview number 2 to Rick Allen, and saying all kinds of acting crazy and saying cussing and trying to intimidate Rick. And Rick, please watch the October 26th, both of them, October 13th, October 26th interview. Rick is innocent and he is nonplussed. He's just looking at Jerry Holman like he's a crazy man. Jerry Holman is, I believe, involved in at least one of the Elvis Fields interviews, but all these other people. But Kevin Murphy's in there, and they're asking him questions, and he's denying. Elvis Fields is denying stuff. Then they say, "Can we get a swab of your mouth for DNA?" And they tell him why, because DNA is going to be at the scene, and if your DNA is there, then. And so that's the end. And then Elvis doesn't have a car at that time, and so they're
before you get there, let me preface this.
Yeah.
So they get on to Elvis Fields because Elvis, soon after the crime was committed, had made confessions or admissions to one of his sisters. His sister is upset about it to the extent where she decides to call it in. And the sister calls it in and says, "This is what my brother said." And we're going to get to it. He says something to the effect that I have brothers now. I was out there when these girls got killed, and the little one was, she was hard to handle. She was a handful, and ultimately I spit on her forehead after it was said and done. And so Elvis Fields' sister was upset, very upset. So she calls it in. They bring her in to do a polygraph to make sure that what she's saying that Elvis said to her, that she's not lying about this event happening. They bring her in and she passes the polygraph. So that predates this. It's important for you to know that. And the detractors out there are going to say, well, Elvis's IQ is very low. He may be intellectually disabled to some extent. None of that matters to me, because no one has come out and said, okay, well, if you have a lower IQ, you're less inclined to just spit things out. It seemed to me, my counter argument to that has always been, well, if you have a lower IQ, you're not going to be able to work those things out in the middle of an interrogation, and or what Andy's about to get to in terms of being able to think through that and think, well, this isn't a good idea to say to a cop. So that's what leads up to this. That's what leads to the interrogation or the interview with Elvis Fields. So
this is the report that Murphy put that I found. I love Kevin Murphy.
Me too.
He's such an honorable guy.
He really is.
Todd Click as well. Todd Click has been,
he's being railroaded.
He's been totally railroaded and maligned. And that's a whole nother topic. The guy should
I'm covering Todd's case. His brother keeping me up to date.
I don't know anything about it. I would help out.
There's some channels that are going deep into it, but I'm waiting until it gets closer to trial, but
Yeah,
I'm being kept up to date on Todd's.
There's a guy that is from the Cincinnati area that I talked to. I don't want to say his name or anything, but man, he is all over that. And he's an honorable guy trying to
low light recovery. That's the guy who's all over. Yes, he's all over Todd's case.
He's all over it.
And I'm thankful for that.
Yeah, man, I am appreciative of that. And I know Todd should be too. I feel bad for Todd. But anyway, Todd, that's a whole other thing that you guys out there don't even know about, that Nick McClelland. I mean, let me stick with one topic. Yesterday I got
there's a lot.
So here, let me read what Trooper Kevin Murphy's notes from this 12-page report. This is on the very first page. February 2018, Troopers Holman and Murphy. Oh, it was Holman. There you go. I forgot. Interview Elvis Fields at Rushville. Holman again wasn't acting like a maniac. It was, more of the soft approach.
He wasn't read techniquing Elvis Fields.
No, of course not. Right. Here's what it says. Elvis denied being part of any murders in Delphi. Elvis consents to a DNA swab taken by Murphy. Elvis ends the interview stating he is tired and wants to go home. Murphy, again, Kevin Murphy's a state trooper, honorable guy, love him. Kevin Murphy drops off Elvis at his residence in the trailer park. Elvis exits the car and starts walking toward his trailer. Elvis then turns around and comes back to Murphy's car. Elvis asks Murphy that if his spit is found on one of the girls, but he could not, let me rephrase, let me do it again. I feel like I'm in a courtroom right now, and I always am listening to my own voice. And did the jury, did my voice trail off? Did they hear what I say? And it never leaves me. So let me read that again. And sometimes when I'm in trial, I'm like, can I ask that question again? I think I heard somebody. There's always a cough in the back, by the way, on the most important word of a sentence.
Always
during a cross exam, and you're just like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to restate this. Somebody coughed
during the most important word or phrase.
It always happens. Anyway, here's that sentence. Elvis asks Murphy that if his spit is found on one of the girls, but he could explain it away, would he still be in trouble? Okay. So that's what this guy who has confessed to his sister said to Kevin Murphy. Kevin Murphy then called Unified Command and said, hey, this is getting even more interesting here. This is what this guy just said. Okay. And then Elvis's alibi falls apart. All right. And I won't get into the weeds on that, but just trust me, that falls apart. Then, and this is where it gets super duper interesting, everybody. Please pay attention to this. This is something that I've been harping on, and it doesn't seem to ever get any traction. So I'm going to try to get some traction here right now. So you've got Brad Holder, who since at least day 3 was a suspect. I can read the report that says that. In fact, let me do that right now, because I like to have, if you read the Frank's memo, I have it is got all kinds of footnotes and exhibits. I think 160 footnotes, 190 exhibits. I back up my claims. Okay.
It's 136 pages long, by the way. And while Andy's searching for that, I want to restate for the detractors out there that wanted to say, oh, like the Prosecutors podcast, who, said, oh, it was written like a gripping fantasy novel. So I want to restate this because it's important if you don't understand how discovery in a criminal case works. Everything that was contained within that Frank's memo came directly from the state of Indiana through discovery. And I'm going to repeat that so you understand it. Every single thing, every fact that they placed in that Frank's memo, that's 136 pages long, came from the state's discovery. Nothing in that memo was made up from whole cloth at all. Any of the factual things that are stated in there are directly from the state's evidence. It was tendered to the defense as reciprocal and mandatory discovery. They had to turn it over. Now, what they did is they did the needle in the haystack trick, and they gave them these huge, massive external hard drives, and buried within, spread all out. These weren't neatly in one kind of like Andy wasn't there one day and like going through. He's like, "Oh, what's this Odin? What's this Odin file?" And click on it, and boom, all the they had to cherry pick through this millions of documents to find all these
videos,
things.
documents, photographs.
It's insane.
Well, by the way, I agree with. Thank you for saying that, and I think it's great to remind that there was one thing, and now I've stumbled upon something else that my wife was really wanting me to talk about. There was one thing that was not that was in the Frank's memo that I believe that was not given to us by the state. It was something that we gave to the judge in an exhibit. And that was, and prepare for you newbies here that are out there, prepare to have your mind blown, and you're not even going to believe me. And that was photographs of Odinist guards wearing their Odinist patches as they paraded Richard Allen to his attorney visit with a camcorder recording the attorney-client interaction, meeting.
In Westville prison.
In Westville,
we're talking about the prison guards here.
Yeah. So when Brad and I, when Richard finally completely lost it and started saying crazy stuff, Brad, I'm going to tell you, Bob, this is a totally true story. And Brad was there. This is in April the 3rd of 2023. I had just started to dig into this Odin stuff. And Brad is a skeptic, man. And one of the reasons I love him, because he and I can work so well together. And he's kind of skeptical. And while we're waiting, so we're at Westville, and here's what's happened.
You need that guy. You know what I mean? You have to have that guy that's the counter to your like, hey, man, am I crazy about this? And,
yes.
Brad will be like,
Brad and I, for those out there who think that we're not getting along or something, my wife said somebody on Reddit was saying this or that. We love each other. He was just at my house. He came to an office party last Friday, everybody. And he brought me a nice bottle of tequila. Brad and I are at Westville on April the 3rd, 2023. This is the day that we got a phone call from Kathy, his wife. He's starting. There you go. Thank you. That is okay. So keep that up there. Yeah. And Brad and I are waiting for Rick to come. We had driven up there. We had canceled our plans for the day. We needed to be there to find out what in the heck was going on with Rick. Why is he saying crazy things? We knew that he was kind of in a downward spiral, but this was really like crazy. So we're up there at Westville, and there's a guy on the Hulu special that toured Westville, and he talks about how terrible it is. You can't even imagine. It's being ripped out of your house into this little cell. They would not let me go look at his cell, by the way. I asked them to. It's awful. And so we're in there waiting for Rick to come in. And I had never noticed these guards before. I'm not saying that they had never brought Rick out, but I never had noticed them before if they had. And I see these guys, and I'm telling Brad as we're waiting, hey, Brad, this Odin stuff is really starting to get some momentum. I'm telling you, I know it sounds crazy. And he's like, I don't know about that. These two guys come with a camcorder, an old school camcorder. One of them is holding, and they're videotaping Rick. And I've never seen this before, ever. And I'm just like, what in the heck is going on? And then they showed up, and I looked at their DOC uniform, and that patch right there that you're looking at on your screen, in Odin We Trust, was on the right side of their body, and the other was on the left side. And those three triangles are the interspersed triangles, which is an Odinist sign, or I don't think it's technically a rune, but it was on their uniform, those two patches right there. I mean, you can't even write this stuff in a movie. It's true. I took a photograph of it. That was the last day they let me keep my phone, bring my phone in to meet Rick. They took our phone after that. By the way, they continued on. Brad and I didn't say anything, and we would still go up and see Brad, and these guys were still wearing their patches, and they were. Again, guys, if you're new to the show, you can't even believe this, but they would videotape and require Richard to stay facing them as they videotaped. Now, as if to say, buddy, we're watching you. And they would not let us put his back to the camera. He's shackled up. it's bizarre. This is not the way normal society works. It's not the way normal interactions with even people in the Department of Corrections works, but that's how it was working from that point forward. And then once the September 18th reveal came of the Frank's memo and this information that they had Odinists in the prison, guess what? They no longer were wearing their patches. And that's just another kind of wild thing about this case. And it never got any traction. I mean, I used to think that was like the number one most like awesome thing that we'd be able to take to trial if we were able to get into the third party suspect stuff. But by the time we would have gotten to trial, had the judge allowed that stuff in, it didn't even make the top 50 probably, which is crazy because there was so much other stuff to talk about. Like,
wait, and so just so you guys know, when Brad and Andy first tried to get Rick out of that prison, okay, and they did a safekeeping hearing, and one of the witnesses that they called was the warden, Gallipo, who no longer is the warden of that prison, by the way, and I think that he's in some women's, I don't know what he's doing.
He's gone. He's completely out of the DOC.
Yeah. So, but Brad asked him a question about that camcorder issue because as a criminal defense attorney who talks to my clients, and it's mandatory that I be able to meet with my client somewhere that's out of ear and eye shot of the government, because I need to be able to converse with that person in confidence. I need for my client to know that they can talk to me without the government listening. So when I heard that they were using this camcorder, and Brad asked Gallipo on the stand in that June hearing whether or not that camcorder had sound, and Gallipo flat out lied, which I didn't learn that he lied until trial. He said, no, it doesn't, there's no sound on that thing. I went home that day and I said, Allison, do you remember those old camcorders that we used to walk around with and they had the mic built in? I'm like, have you ever heard of one not having a microphone? And she's like, no. So when we get to trial, fast forward, when we get to trial, Gallipo's on the stand again. They asked that same question, whether or not there was sound. His answer was completely different. And it was like, yeah, it has sound. And the only reason that came up is because they had to turn over the evidence in terms of discovery of the videos that were being taken by the handheld camcorder to the defense. Brad was getting ready to show those videos. And all of a sudden, Gull's sitting up on the bench. Brad says, can I go? And she's like, yeah, do they have sound? And Brad's like, yeah, they have sound. She's like, whoa, hold on. So they had to then take a break, a half an hour to 45-minute break. And they had Max, one of their young paralegals at that point, who's now, I believe, in law school, yes. But he had to go fix it and pull the sound because we were led to believe that there was no sound on those, only to come to find out through that interaction that there actually was sound, which means that they were filming Rick with his attorneys and all the time that he was walking around. He was on camera 24/7, except when he was with Dr. Monica Walla. That was the only time, conveniently, that he wasn't on camera. So they had to go.
She was able to write down anything that she says that he said, which was a big part of her case, and it's so ridiculous. My wife just brought up another good point, and she said,
should we just have Michelle come on?
Yeah, she should come on. She's awesome.
But I mean, I'd happily have Michelle on, no question.
It's a valid point here that had we been able to get into the third party suspect stuff, doesn't that in Odinism, and there's Odin guards, don't you think maybe that would have impact on a jury as they're trying to decipher where these so-called confessions were real or not, or were they coerced by these guards? But we weren't able to get into that.
None of it.
So did Brad
the crime scene? Like, I mean, there.
Yeah. Well,
not only did she keep out the third party culprit stuff, but she wouldn't let the defense talk about what the crime scene looked like.
Yes.
I want that to settle with you. Yeah. I want you to think about any case that you've ever heard of, ever. If you're a true crime connoisseur and you watch, stuff on Discovery ID and Oxygen, you just can't get enough true. Have you ever heard of a situation wherein the defense was barred from mentioning what exactly Andy had to tiptoe around when he was describing what the crime scene looked like? Because he couldn't say anything like a rune or like, even if he said the word of formation,
Yeah.
She like the hairs on her neck were
the
standing
first
up.
time
She's
it
like,
happened,
"Come on."
Bob, was during my opening, and there was no objection at all. And man, I wrote a tight opening in terms of, I know you read it and I did listen to it and I thought you did a good job. I was very fearful that when I heard it, I'm like, oh, I don't know how that's, and at the end I thought, okay, it was pretty good. It was okay. I liked it. It was not horrific or anything, but at the end, Judge Gall, if you remember, I'm just about to talk about the sticks. And then she, without objection, just says, Mr. Baldwin, this is getting into this. You're not characterizing the evidence, or I don't remember exactly what she said. You're not previewing the evidence. You're now arguing, which was not happening, but it was right when I was talking about the sticks.
Right.
So yeah, you're exactly right, Bob. And there was no way. And so during the trial, there was a moment related to Brad, I think it was McClelland asked a really bad question, or asked, I don't know if it was a bad question, but it was a bad answer from Jerry Holman, where, Jerry Holman responded by saying, yeah, the sticks on the girls were a covering, trying to cover the bodies. And then later he said it was an undoing. It also could be an undoing. An undoing is a, Don Perlmutter, our expert, would tell you that that's just preposterous. They didn't really understand what an undoing is. It's where you find shame in what you did. So you dress the people up and you make them, you make it look as after you've killed them as if they're still alive, and that you cover up their injuries and stuff like that. And so when Jerry Holman said those two things, and I think it was Jerry that said those two things, now it's like I filed a motion. You should get that motion out. It was filed in the middle of trial. And I said, Judge, in the motion, I said, they can't be saying what their opinion is as to what those sticks are that they're covering, or it's an undoing. And we're not allowed to say they've opened the door. That's what we call it. They've opened the door to Odinism now. Right. It is not fair for them to give their opinion to the jury as to what these sticks represent, when we know we have our own expert that says that the sticks are a formation. They opened up the door. Wasn't good enough.
It was,
and never even ruled on it.
And again, if you want to hear what Dr. Perlmutter would have testified to a trial, I interviewed her as well. Another brilliant woman who also teaches the feds, because like law enforcement in our country is not taught to process and doesn't think of ways in a crime scene other than the way that they're taught in terms of processing. So when they see an unusual crime scene, they don't know how to take it. Yeah. And her interview was fabulous. She backs up everything she says with receipts, and she's just highly credible and highly
called it a textbook ritualistic crime scene. Okay. And so she testified on August the 1st at the hearing, when we're trying to get into the Odin stuff. And so basically the state did not put on any expert that I remember that opposed Dr. Perlmutter. So here we go again. Judge Gall is up there. Apparently she is an expert on ritualistic killing, and she has apparently taught FBI agents across the land and testified for police across the land. That's what she mainly testifies for police, by the way, Dr. Perlmutter, because Judge Gall just disregarded what Dr. Perlmutter had to say, who's written the book. She literally wrote the book on ritualistic crime scenes. People say that all the time. She literally wrote the book. And even if you think that she's kind of, out there, which she's not, it's all based in science and stuff, and research and so forth. She still had the jury. That's for the jury to decide. That is not for the judge to decide. That's the third party suspect. That's the whole thing about the third party suspect. The judge took away from the jury their right to know information so that they can come up with their own conclusion. For example, people say, well, Brad Holder, this is what I wanted to read. When did Brad Holder become a suspect? That's just the defense saying crap, right? So this is emails between all the law enforcement officers at the time, and it's dated February the 17th. At 7:02 p.m. Okay, this is what it looks like. And all these people are in this, and kind of slapping each other on the back about how awesome they are. I find that amusing right at the top. First, the kudos is what it says. First, before we get into the evidence, into what's been going on, I want to give kudos. That's fine. How about just solving the crime first before you give out any kudos?
They like to slap backs, law enforcement.
Well, then here it is.
In this case, in all cases.
There's all these bullet points that they're going through. And this is, again, 17. This is 3 days after the girls are found. Here's, it looks like to be bullet point number 7 or so. Yeah. Suspect number 6 is being worked hard right now, too. He has ties to Bradley Holder, who we have been working. He may have ties to Vinlanders. DT squad apprised and tasked sources to collect any intelligence which may assist. So that's Brad Holder being talked about right there. What I found interesting about that is not just that Brad Holder is being talked about that early on, for all those who think that we just made that up. I like this part here. And we tasked sources to collect any intelligence which may assist. So here you got this guy that is a suspect whose son dated Abby, who has runes all over, who put out a meme. We believe the bodies were moved, and even they believe the bodies were moved. And he put out a meme. It's in the Hulu special where they show the meme that he put out I think it was a matter of a week or two after the murders, that says you have to look at the special to see it. But essentially, Brad Holder posted this. You really find out who your friends are after they have helped you move a body. Just take that in, everybody, along with all the other things that we've been talking about. Well, then, so this says the police, the law enforcement have been tasked to collect any intelligence related to Brad Holder. So what's the best piece of evidence in today's world that you can gather from somebody to know where they were, what they're doing? Bob, you got any answers on that one? Oh, yes, a phone, right. Law enforcement collected 102 phones and extracted the data from 102 phones. Some of these guys were like Billy Bob from Bremen, Indiana, whose sister thought he might have been down there, and they went in and extracted that phone. But the phone that they claim that they never extracted was Brad Holder's phone, even though Brad Holder, under oath in a deposition, probably not knowing what we know or don't know, said, yeah, they took my phone. And we're told that the one guy who's on, he along with suspect 6 is being worked hard on right now. They didn't collect his phone. So they say. It's sick. And I don't know that much about the Karen Reed case. I saw somebody had posted. I usually don't read these things, but it said that the clothing in the creek was like the glass shards or whatever. There's going to be a lot of that kind of thing going on here. Let me read the next bullet point, just so you know. This is 3 days afterwards. Crime scene photos and victimology have been passed to BAU. They will deploy a specialist in support of this investigation, especially focused on what may be pagan rituals, the placement of branches and sticks on the girls' bodies. That's on day 3, everybody that thinks that we just made that stuff up. And then Kevin Murphy, Todd Click, and Greg Ferenczi went out and investigated all of that stuff. And
Andy, tell me, obviously when you watch the videos of the interviews of Brad Holder in those crucial 3 days after, what did he say in those videos? I'm dying to know.
Thank you, Bob, because as you know from being a trial lawyer, some of the most important parts of a case are the early interviews that are videotaped, because if the people are lying, they're going to get caught, because over time the lies get exposed. So I was really super excited to read or to watch Brad Holder, Patrick Westfall, Logan Holder's videotaped interviews. And I'd been asking for those videotaped interviews from August the 10th, September the 10th, October the 10th, November the 10th, December. I was off the case for a while then. That's a whole other story. But Nick McClelland, the prosecutor, never turned it over. And I was just shocked. And I kept asking and asking. Well, then when we got back on the case around January 20th, I get a new discovery dump of all the old hard drives, except they've all now changed a little bit. And in it, there's a piece of paper which details what is generally on these hard drives. And on hard drive, one of the hard drives, we called it R2D2. On that hard drive description, it said, this is on there and that's on there. And interviews from February the 15th to I think February the 28th were all tape recorded over. And that would include the videotaped interview of Brad Holder, Patrick Westphal, and Logan Holder, just videotaped over. Here's what should have happened in a normal world. I've been saying this. Prosecutor, when that should have been like the biggest news. My own opinion is that stuff was not recorded over. That's my own opinion, based upon everything that I know, based upon, how this case was handled and where we were headed. But even if it was recorded over, that's the biggest news of all time in that case at that moment in time. They claim it was videotaped over sometime in 2017, and they discovered it, right? And they discovered it. And that would be sending shockwaves throughout the unified command and everybody. They'd be like freaked out. Oh my gosh, we need to go out and conduct new interviews. Well, they hadn't even written down who they interviewed. And then they certainly didn't go back out and interview anybody if they actually recorded over. And so therefore, what I'm saying is when I'm asking McClelland for these interviews in 2023 all the time, his first reaction should have been this. Oh my gosh, Andy, I can't believe we didn't tell you this. Yeah, there was a whole bunch of videos that were recorded over right after all those interviews, those key interviews right afterward, they were all taped over, Andy. And I can't believe I forgot to tell you that. So I'm really sorry about that, man. We just don't have them. We have some memorialized, reports from those, but we really don't have anything. That's what he should have said to me initially, because there's no way that you don't know that when I'm asking you for it. But instead, he never manned up and told me that if they were even recorded over. He slid it into a little fine print of a document. And I had to if I hadn't read that fine print, then I wouldn't have even known it. And that's how when I filed motions to dismiss, that all of that key evidence is missing. And one of the things they did memorialize, so that's bad, everybody. If you haven't figured that out, that's really, really bad. And nobody seems to care. Judge Gall never, ever chastised the prosecution over any of these things.
Does that sound familiar, Karen Reed, folks?
Is that another similarity?
Oh, yeah. Like that, state did all kinds of, Commonwealth did all kinds of shit in that case. And she never had any grave concerns about it. And the judge in that case, and I kept trying to tell people, because I came out of Rick's case and I had watched the first trial and we covered it on our channel. And I was like, so I was shell shocked from watching Gull for 3 years. And, everybody's like, oh, but Canoni, who's the judge Canoni in that case, she's so biased. I'm like, I would have paid good money to have Canoni sit on the bench for this case. And I'm talking about your case as opposed, because it was like, people just don't understand the levels of, and I don't know what it is. The woman has been on the bench for a long time. She knows better. Her explanation in terms, because obviously you guys filed motions with respect to, these missing videos, and she felt, which I think you were about to talk to, in terms of the memorialization, what they thought was sufficient in terms of what they said happened in the interviews with Brad Holder. It's
like 700 words. It's nothing. And in it, one thing that we do know is that he said he never met Abby. Okay.
Right.
Why is that important? Well, because after I chastised Jerry Holman, you're not going to do any investigation of the Odinist stuff and Brad Holder on August 10th, 2023, after the deposition, on his way out, he and I were having words, and I just challenged him. I said, you're not going to do crap. You just aren't. I know guys like you. Well, he brought in Brad Holder and for an interview on August, I think, 23rd of 2023. And, they didn't kiss him, during the interview, but, it was pretty, hey, I'm really sorry. We're just here to, they certainly didn't yell at him. They didn't have him explain anything like how he knows Elvis Fields, by the way, which we didn't.
Yeah, there was no actual questioning of any.
They didn't do anything. And by the way, remember Elvis Fields down in Rushville? I forgot to put a button on that one. We later learn this guy who's worried about his spit being found on the girls, this guy who's confessed, who's now part of a gang. Brad Holder's in a Vinlander. Why would they know each other? Yet Elvis Fields admits I was following Brad Holder, and Brad Holder was imitating me on Facebook, doing the things like taking brass knuckles and putting knives around or weapons around it. And then I would do that, Elvis Fields would say, and then Brad Holder would do the same thing. And he was mimicking me. Okay. Why do those two guys know each other? And does anybody care? I mean, it's the most, it's so frustrating that, and I remember at trial, Judge Gull, I actually was trying again to bring in Odinism. And I made this same pitch that I just did. And she at least admitted this. I remember this because I was shocked. She said, well, you've proven that those two knew each other, but there's no nexus to the crime. That's what she said. And I'm like, well, this guy has confessed to his sisters that he, in his spit, well, how do they know? And it just didn't matter. And I don't know that I'm making sense right now.
Oh yeah, you're making sense.
It's super unbelievable that we weren't able to put that out there. And, but that's,
it's hard to make sense of the nonsensical. And I'm talking from the legal realm, from strictly, how is it significant that Rick Allen's making confessions, and I'm using air quotes, while he's psychotic, and then he's being involuntarily administered Haldol, and he's saying these things like, I did it, and I don't know.
Yeah. That's another thing.
So those confessions seem to matter, but when Elvis Fields, prior to anybody being arrested, makes a confession that he was there, that he left his DNA on one of the girls, how isn't that a nexus? Can anybody explain that to me? I don't give a shit what his IQ is. Did they ever go and swab after he says that? Did they ever go and swab Abby's forehead? Did that ever happen?
Yeah.
Because you're not going to see saliva once it's dried. And before I forget the point, and maybe because I've wanted to ask you this, and we've probably discussed it, off interview before. If the girls were brought across Deer Creek, and granted, it was a unusually mild day, like mid 40s, but overnight it dropped below zero. If they crossed the creek, why weren't the clothes that Abby was clothed in, why weren't they wet and or frozen solid? If you were dragged across a creek in those conditions, there is no way that the clothes would be dry. They couldn't be. If you were even chest high or waist high in that creek, there is no way.
There were some photos that
made the proposition they didn't cross the creek, that they went back north and went up and around.
I think that is definitely possible. I did see some photos that I'll try to be fair again, that I thought, it looks like it could be a water line, but were the clothes wet? That's a different issue, isn't it? I don't know if that water line came from being there earlier or if they were ever there, but no, there's so many holes in this thing that you could sit all day. I mean, what are we at now? We're at 2.5 hours. Bob, you and I have been talking, and we haven't. I want to talk about this very quickly because this will show you who Jerry Holman. I just heard that he's getting the Comic-Con,
Crime Con,
Crime Con.
Investigator of the Year.
Investigator of the Year. Okay, so let's talk about this. So, Brad, I've got receipts here too. Brad and I, when we went into the week of August, I want to say something very, very quick. Nick McClelland received a letter from Todd Click's lawyer saying, basically, we think you've got the wrong guy. We've been investigating this. Todd Click said this. Kevin Murphy and Ferenczi and I have all been investigating this thing. I'm not sure that you ever gave these stuff over to the defense. I'm not even sure that you know about this investigation. So this is a major thing for those who are new to this too. Before I forget it. And Nick McClellan received that on May 1st. Nick McClellan did. And it's a mind blower. Like when you get that type of evidence, and it contained a flash drive with all these interviews that had never been turned over to me. Elvis Fields interviews, Rod Abrams, the guy that he was with, Ned Smith, the guy he worked for, Johnny Messer, all these guys that are super important for the defense. We never got it. Todd Click had a great hunch that maybe they didn't turn that over to the defense. So Todd Click, sent a letter. He hired a lawyer because he didn't know exactly how to handle this. He sent a letter to Nick McClellan by certified mail. We know that Nick signed off on it May 1. And in it, it said basically this, and I'm going to paraphrase very roughly here. Hey, I was shocked to see that Richard Allen, this guy named Richard Allen, was arrested because did you ever see our investigation? Because we think we had the right people. What happened? Maybe Richard Allen is a part of an Odinist or whatever. And if so, I'd like to know that. By the way, look, Richard Allen has nothing to do with Odinism, Norse paganism. And at his interview, somebody picked this up. I don't want to take credit because I'm always wanting to give credit where it's due. Somebody, one of you people out there, and I don't remember where I saw it or who sent it to me. They said, did you see that when Richard Allen was interrogated on October the 13th, the first interrogation, they asked him some very unusual questions. What kind of hobbies do you have? Okay. He's there seemingly to give them information to help find the killer, right? So they're asking him, what kind of hobbies do you have? You know, the thought bubble above their head when they ask the question is, please say Norse paganism. Please
Right.
Please say Viking culture. What church do you go to? What church do you go to? Why do you think they're asking that question? It's because they still knew that Odinism was what if Rick Allen would have said, I am an Odinist, then all that crap that they're trying to shovel nowadays, that was never a thing, that's why they're asking the question. It was still on the table on October the 13th, 2022, when Richard Allen was interrogated. That's what they were trying to get at. They were trying to figure out, did he have Norse paganism in his background? Okay. And so these three guys, and so, by the way, I know I'm hitting everybody with a lot of stuff, but that's a pretty big deal. Thank you for whoever figured that out. There's probably multiple people way smarter than I am that figured that out. I didn't see that. But next time around, if I'm fortunate enough to be on the case when it gets reversed, I'm going to listen to your people and to the people a lot more. And I owe them an apology. I do. I should have listened. It's upsetting that I didn't, but it's a weird world. And I don't know what happened, but they have great ideas. Like you said earlier, Bob, they are internet sleuths, and they are the ones doing the It's not, I don't even like that phrase, maybe internet sleuths. It's investigative journalists. Maybe that's the right way. And some of them are full of, hooey, and they're all kind of, some of them are kind of crazy and stuff. I still love them, but I'm able to kind of discern between some, but on a case like this, you can't really even get into that world where you start discerning between crazy and not crazy, because it's all crazy.
And there's those out there that come with receipts. I mean,
yes,
there are people that have dedicated hundreds and hundreds of hours to this case, wherein they've dug into everything that they have access to. And there are just people out there that
they're awesome. There's a lady that just this very morning, I won't say her name, but she sent me something that I have not had a chance to look at. You know who you are if you're watching. I'm guessing you are. But it is an email that I don't know how she got her hands on it. It might be exculpatory evidence that was not turned over. I've got to figure this out. I got to figure out whether it's real. I need to know these things. But yeah, there's people that would turn stuff over to me, and there's only so many hours in a day, of course, and you can't, and you got to, you got a lot to do, but I was out at the NACDL, which is the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. And I got tuned into these people that are organizers of discovery, but more importantly, they follow and track social media on a case like this. And so next time, that's going to be a priority. We need a professional to get into the trenches and pay attention to what's being said, and then reporting periodically to us. And that would be very useful. So all of you people out there that have been assisting and want to help, it is very appreciated. It really is. And I wish that I could get to everybody and thank you. Even those that just maybe what the information they provided wasn't really of substance that was useful or whatever, they were still trying to help out. And I appreciate that very much. I don't know how much longer you want to go. If you want to, you're in New Orleans, you probably have something better to do.
Keep rolling, man. Keep rolling.
Well, I wanted to talk real quickly about Jerry Holman, the new Law Enforcement Officer of the Year, and to kind of take a little dive into about how honest he was early on in our relationship, Jerry and my relationship, Jerry Holman. So the first time I met Jerry Holman was on August the 10th, 2023. It was at his deposition. And that week, Brad and I had really strategized hard. I think you've heard this before, Bob. We knew that the Odin stuff was out there, and we didn't know if they knew that we knew about the Odin. So we were trying to smoke them out. Were they going to be honest and say, yeah, that was really a big deal, we really looked into that, and then tell us a real answer about why they stopped looking into it? Because to this very day, I'm not really sure why. I can tell you it wasn't because of a Purdue professor. We're going to get to that in a second. But we were hoping that they would be honest, but we were wondering if they were. So we start with Liggett, I think, on the first day, and we're talking about different suspects, and we get to Brad Holder in the middle of it, and like, what about this guy? There's really nothing there. Was there anything like unusual about the crime scene that, there was something about, I don't know, I don't remember. And it was just a whole lot of like what we were hoping they were going to say is, yeah, there was this thing called Odinism, guy. Because when you're being honest, that's how you operated. What they should have done. This is how I have to do things nowadays. Is like, what should they have done? Here's what they should have done. Oh yeah, you should know about that. That whole Odinism thing. We really were invested in that big time, and we were wanting to figure out, because obviously, Andy, you've seen the crime scene photos, and there's sticks on those girls, and there were some detectives out there that thought this was Odinism early on. So we were investigating that. But here's what happened, Andy. That's what, if they were being honest, that's what would have happened. But instead it was like, I don't know. Well, I don't know. Nothing. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm overplaying that a little bit, but it was pretty much that. I don't want to go through their individual depositions and get to that section where we're asking and they're like, yeah, there was really nothing to see there. We heard talk about this Purdue professor. Well, Jerry Holman was the last. Well, Kevin Murphy was the last deposition of that week, and their paths crossed right after Jerry Holman's deposition. That's a whole nother story that's contained in the July. You might want to read up on your July 31st transcript, where he describes Kevin Murphy, Honorable Kevin Murphy, describes his interaction with Jerry Holman and the dressing down that Jerry Holman gave Kevin Murphy for having the audacity to somehow we put our hands upon the 12-page, what I call Odin report, was Murphy's. And on his way out, Holman learned that we did actually have this 12-page report. And on his way out, Murphy testified under oath that Holman looked at him and said, how the F did they get this? Okay. Now, there's some ways you can interpret that. One of those is the obvious one, is we weren't supposed to get it.
Right.
Okay. And so during that deposition with Jerry Holman, we are kind of doing a rope-a-dope. This is what we had done all week. Brad was the front end and I was the back end. And for Brad was like, well, what about this Brad Holder guy? Yeah, there wasn't anything really going on there. I mean, I could read it to you. What about this Odin stuff? Well, no, that's actually not how it got brought up. I'm going to read it to you right out of the deposition. So this is Jerry Holman's deposition right here. And I'm reading off of page 62 and 63. And so you have the context. I'm going to read it because I always think that's important. So you don't think I'm trying to, pull one over on you. Brad Rosie asked this question to Jerry Holman. Let's talk about what I've titled here as hate crimes. Okay, that's kind of my general description. Did any part of your investigation focus on the possibility that these deaths could have resulted from a hate crime? Okay, for those that don't know, Odinism has been really hijacked in some corners, at least, by white nationalists. Okay, and so that's why, Brad, we were trying to figure out the right wording to see if they were going to be honest or not, and we didn't want to just come out and say Odinism. So we were talking about hate crime. So see how this unfolds in this deposition. This is August 10th, 2023 deposition. So did any part of your investigation, Brad Rosie asked, focus on the possibility that these deaths could have resulted from a hate crime? Yes, Jerry says that was part of their investigation. Tell me what the focus was, Brad asks. Jerry answers. The focus was how the bodies were found and that they had sticks laid on top of them. And I forget the exact investigator that brought up a term called Odinism. So he did bring it up. That's refreshing. Jerry did. Sergeant Steve Buckley reached out to a professor at Purdue that he actually was out of the country at the time. We did not release the photos, but we released a sketch of the sticks. That's probably the sketch that's found on the Hulu special. How they were laid out and some other information. Here's the key, everybody. And that Purdue professor, I can't remember his name, said that it was not Odinism or any type of cult worshiping or any type of a group that would have conducted the crime. And so that's the reason why Jerry Holman's trying to explain to us they moved away from Odinism because of this Purdue professor. Okay. And this. So I'm like, well, okay. So what did the Purdue professor have to say? And I'm sitting there thinking, maybe Jerry's not being honest here. Let's find out. How do you think we can find out? Let's talk to the Purdue professor. Maybe Jerry did not think that we would do that. I don't know. So immediately after the deposition, we said, we want to talk to the Purdue professor. The guy who, everybody that's listening, please understand this. According to Jerry Holman, he completely altered the landscape of the investigation away from Odinism, all that stuff that you see on the Hulu special about Brad Holder that connected him, in the eyes of the police officers, at least, to the crime. And Elvis Fields, who's down in Rushville and somehow knows Brad Holder, all of that. We're trying to figure out, are they going to be honest about it? And he says, no, there's no reason. This Purdue professor said there's no Odinism here. Okay. So let's check that out by talking to the Purdue professor. So how long do you think in a normal world, Bob, that it would take for them to locate in the name and phone number of this Purdue professor? How long should that take? This was on a Thursday, August 10th, I believe it was a Thursday.
Considering there's probably at most two professors at Purdue that may tinker with that kind of area of knowledge, I'd say 5 minutes.
Or how about you have reports and you have data banks of all your old files and, now who's the guy? Oh, he said Buckley, right? He said his name there. Let's call Buckley up. Buckley, who was the guy? Okay. Text him. I bet he's on his speed dial. Okay. On Jerry Holman's speed dial is Buckley. That's the guy who was in charge of that, right? Let me say, yeah, Steve Buckley, Sergeant Steve Buckley. Hey, Steve, this is Jerry Holman. Who was that Purdue professor? You remember his name? Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, he's at Purdue still. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. It should have taken 5 minutes, like you said.
Right.
Right. So that's Thursday, August the 10th. Friday, the 11th, we don't hear from Nick McClelland. The next week, we don't hear from Nick, but we're calling him. This is a big deal to us, a gigantic deal, because if what Holman says is true, it might be our time to get away from the Odin stuff. I'm not saying we would have, but at least we'd have to think, okay, this Purdue professor, let's go figure it out. So we're waiting to find out the Purdue professor name. The next week, No, I don't know who it is yet. What do you mean you don't know who it is? Following week. Hey, we are emailing him. Where's the Purdue professor? Who is it? I'll get to cut to the chase. September the 6th. So we're now almost a full month later. They still claim that they can't find the Purdue professor. Now, one reason that I'm suspecting is they don't want us to find the Purdue professor because he might say something that opposes what Jerry Holman said under oath, that the Odinism had nothing to do with this case. That's what he said under oath. I just read it to you, his very words. Maybe they are trying to hide this professor because it don't make any sense at all that they can't figure out who this guy is in a month. So September 6th, we get this email from the prosecutor, Nick McClelland, September the 6th at 8:05 a.m. All right. Brad. He didn't like me much. I don't think he wouldn't have included my name in there. But
you're so nice, though. Such a friendly
guy. I
actually
am very nice.
You actually are very nice. You're a very nice person.
Brad, this is Nick McClelland, September the 6th. As stated before, we are trying to identify the Purdue professor, but no luck yet. Detective Holman has reached out to the FBI and Purdue and has not gotten a response yet. Later on, you'll find out that that's untrue. Holman issued a report later on and detailed that we knew who it was on the 14th of August or right after that, which is still took way too long. But Holman didn't know that McClelland had sent this email out. So that's where that happened.
Oopsies.
So, what's that?
Oopsies.
Yeah, oopsies.
Yeah.
Now,
two ships passing in the night.
Detective Holman has reached out to the FBI and Purdue and has not gotten a response yet. We will continue our endeavors, but we may not be able to identify him or her. So everybody listening, basically what McClelland is saying right at that moment is we may never be able to find this guy. Just get used to that concept. It's the most crazy thing.
He's up and vanished.
I mean, it's insane.
Like
Let me read it again.
Wind.
We may not be able to identify him or her. What do you mean? What do you mean? They did not want us to find a professor. That's clear. In my opinion, it's very clear. Later on, again, Holman issued a report saying that they found out who this guy was in the middle of August. Nick, once Holman on August the 10th said this was not about Odinism, well, because the Purdue professor told us it was not Odinism when he analyzed the sticks on the girls as Germanic Runic scripts. That's what they were tasked to do, the Purdue professor. Hey, look at the sticks on the girls. Professor Turco, and that's the name of the guy.
Yep.
Can you tell us whether or not this has anything to do with a Germanic Runic script? Okay. So September the 12th, Nick McClelland says, we don't know who it is, even after a month, and you may never be able to figure that out. We may never be able to figure that out. What Nick McClelland did not know that was going on simultaneously to that circus was I was drafting the Franks memo. And in the Franks memo, part of what we have to do is call out police for, dishonest behavior, like what we talked about earlier about Liggett not putting in there about Betsy Blair's description of the car, that kind of thing. And I added to the Franks memo Nick's email. And I said, we're trying to find out who this Purdue professor is. And it's so ridiculous and preposterous. Now, I didn't say it exactly this way, but this is the way it came off in the Franks memo. They even are telling us they may never be able to find this guy. And there's something real wrong with that, Judge. There's something going on here. That's basically the tenor of what I was saying. And Nick McClelland in a million years could never have imagined that I would call him out that way. He never could have imagined in a million years that the Franks memo was going to be 136 pages and talk about all of this stuff, including this minutia about the Purdue professor. Okay. So that's filed, the Franks memo, for the world to see on September the 18th. So think about that. 12 days earlier, they may never be able to find the Purdue professor. How long do you think it took them to find the Purdue professor once that came out and the world knows that he's missing?
30 seconds.
Well, they already knew where he was.
Yeah.
But they went and interviewed him on September the 19th. Jerry Holman went out there and interviewed him. And it is everything wasn't so sad because it has impact on Richard Allen, you could sit here and laugh about all this stuff all day long, and you kind of have to. So they go and interview, and you should. This is the transcript of the interview, and the actual audio is even more funny because Jerry Holman you can just tell he is freaking out. Because again, if you're following the bouncing ball here, everybody, August the 10th, a little over a month earlier, Jerry Holman under oath said, the Purdue professor said this had nothing to do with Odinism. That's why we moved on. So this professor better be saying the same thing to be consistent so that Jerry Holman doesn't look like he lied under oath. So shall we dive into what the Purdue professor actually said during this interview?
Let's hear it.
I'll give you a little bit of context because it's super funny. It's better. It's better when it's oral. This is the star of the Crime Con, by the way, who's getting a big award. So talks about how he talked to Steve Buckley, was the trooper. Right. That's right. So this is right. I don't want to go through the whole entire thing, but this is right at the beginning. They basically have come to, I think they're at his office, and it's like, hey, man, how's it going? And then one of the first things is, yeah, we've been trying to get a hold of you for a few weeks. That's what they say. When Nick McClelland had said, no, they don't even know who it is. I mean, there's just all kinds of problems.
And just so people that may be coming in from Karen Reed and you're used to the Commonwealth, in Indiana, defense attorneys are allowed to conduct depositions of witnesses prior to trial. It's a beautiful thing. I don't know why it's not allowed in every state in the union, because it really is important in terms of uncovering things prior to trial. So Andy doesn't have to put a witness on having never spoken to that person and merely going. So they get to do the depths. So everybody that they needed to depose, they deposed in very short order. I mean, the deposition work on this case, I think that people don't really understand how time consuming it is, because you have to study what you're going to ask. You have to prepare your deposition questions, and there's
strategy,
many depths that went on. So
big time. The people that don't get, there's only like 5 states that get depositions, Bob, and we're one of them. And it's ridiculous that the other states don't. It solves a lot of problems. You do depositions, and your case sucks, and you get rid of it. You plead it out or whatever. Or the state sees that the accuser is not credible or whatever, and they get rid of the case. It's really outrageous that we're not allowed to do that in other states. But in Indiana, we are. But then you run into problems if you're not telling the truth. Okay. So Jerry Holman, back to that, says, Purdue professor says, no, no Odinism here, no cult here. So they're at the beginning. I'm on page 4 of this document to give you a little context. And it's a little broken, so it'll be kind of hard. But when I talked to them, this is Jerry Holman. Steve Buckley said, oh, no, I didn't get a report. So I'm thinking later on we got a hold of Nicole, and she got a report. They're talking about Nicole Robertson, who's an FBI agent. I'd have to go back and check my email. Not a big deal, but and this is Jerry, but he said basically he's talking about Buckley here. Okay. The he here. Anybody in my law firm knows that I am a pronoun like fiend. You need to who he.
Right.
My wife even gets a little bit of that from time to time. Who he, Michelle, but and she wants to smack me. But he said basically, and I think he's talking about Steve Buckley here. So Jerry Holman is saying, but Steve Buckley said basically, Professor Turco, you told him that when you looked at it, it basically could be anything. He's talking about the sticks. And I think you kind of put this in your report. You're like guessing it might. Okay. All right. Let's stop there. Already that's different than what he testified to under oath already. Remember what he said. It has nothing to do with Odinism. It's not Odinism. It's not a cult like. And now he knows that he got caught with his hand in the cookie jar. So now he's trying to massage. This is what it looks like to me. He's trying to massage this thing and tell him, kind of manipulate Professor Turco into saying what Holman wants him to say. So let me repeat it. This is Jerry Holman talking to Professor Turco. in this interview of September 19th, the day after the Franks memo. But Buckley said, basically, you told him that when you looked at it, it basically could be anything. So Holman knows now that he can't say it's nothing because he knows that the sticks were nothing. Holman knows that he cannot say that to Turco because Turco did not say that. There's the end of the story. And so he's trying to smooth it like, and maybe I can get him to say that it could be anything. It could be anything. And I think you kind of put this in your report. You're like guessing it might, and then Turco interrupts him. Listen to this, everybody. I guess because we know that Holman has probably told the truth back in August the 10th, that what we're about to hear is that Turco is going to say, yes, the sticks did not have anything to do with Odinism. Let's see if that's the case. Here's Turco's response. No, I mean, it certainly appears to be, some sort of attempt at a kind of runic, script. But as to deciphering, the meaning behind that with any certainty, that's a bit of a guessing game. I recall, I would like to go back and read what I wrote, but I recall tossing out a couple of sort of hypotheticals maybe. But I think the idea, and listen to this, I think the idea that somebody is trying to kind of replicate a kind of, early Germanic, runic script, that seems, a given. It's a given. Now let's compare that to what Jerry Holman said on August the 10th under oath, this law enforcement officer under oath. He said, oh, where is it? I have it right here. The Purdue professor said that it was not Odinism or any type of cult or worshiping or any type of group that would have conducted the crime. That's what Jerry Holman said under oath. And this is what the Purdue professor said. It's a given that was a runic script.
That doesn't sound like, no, it has nothing to do with runic scripts or Odinism to me. It sounds like a flat out lie. But what do I know?
Well, that's your officer of the year or whatever at CrimeCon. Okay. Apparently, if that's accurate information. And listen, I don't like busting everybody's balls, but man, we got a guy in prison here and nobody's done a daggone thing about what I just read. I've put it out there.
130 years, Andy.
What's that?
130 years.
Yes, it got 130 years. And Jerry Holman, on the Hulu special, they asked him on one, I don't know, it was Ray Hughes or whoever asked him, and thank you for actually asking a tougher question, which was, I don't know how it was lobbed, but what about the missing video, the Brad Holder videos and all those videos that were allegedly taped over? And Jerry Holman is just like, it happens. There's no shame, no embarrassment, no apology. How about an apology? I'm really sorry about that. It shouldn't go down that way. It's not the way the system works. We made a big mistake. But he said, that's what happens. Something along those lines.
Well, in light of everything else, it seems pretty damn convenient that they lost all the interviews, doesn't it? I mean, it's hard not to think that. It
is. That's why it's hard for me to believe that that was tape recorded over. And because of what I just read, maybe, listen, if I can be generous in terms of trying to understand what a normal person that got caught like that, and the fact that they tried to hide the professor is what does it for me. That's why I don't believe, I believe that they were trying to hide the Odinism through the Purdue professor and lie about that. That's because why would you try to hide the Purdue professor? Right. I mean, it was like the most juvenile effort by McClelland. Hey, I don't know that we were ever going to be able to find the guy. Oh man, I pray that they're not going to keep asking me about the Purdue professor. Please, I just told them in an email on September 6th that we may never be able to find the Purdue professor. So maybe they'll stop. Maybe Andy Baldwin will stop asking me about the Purdue professor. I pray that that's the case. I mean, what did they think we were going to do? I mean, I had to drive down. Somebody asked a question, by the way. I wanted to address this. I was on Andy Kopps's show, and somebody had asked, why did Andy waste money going down to Georgia to get the mimicked
Brad Holder picture? Yeah.
And here I have that's a great question, and here's why. Had I not done that, we would never have been able to lay a foundation for it, because and what I mean by that is, yes, I guess it was out there on the internet. I was unaware of that if and when it was. I'm relying on a piece of paper. And for those that don't know, watch the Hulu special, and there's a mimicked crime scene photo. We addressed it a little earlier, where two girls are on the forest floor, and this guy down in Georgia had seen it. Ryan Boucher is his name, a really smart guy, and he thought something was very odd on Brad Holder's Facebook page, and so he emailed and started communication with a Trooper Winters at the Lafayette post where Jerry Holman worked. And Winters and Boucher, the guy down in Georgia, are going back and forth. And Boucher sends images that he found on Brad Holder's Facebook post, including the one on his Facebook page, including the image of the two girls on the forest floor when nobody knew what the crime scene looked like. Okay. And it's sad that that's such like, I'm just acting like that's not a big deal. It's a gigantic deal. But we were never given that. The state of Indiana never turned that image over, even though they had it. Okay. Because Ryan Boucher, the guy in Georgia, sent it through the internet, sent it to Trooper Winters, and Winters showed it to Holman. Okay. So they all were aware of what was on that this image existed. And Brad and I had to make a decision about, do we go to the state and say, hey, there's this report here that describes two girls on a forest floor that was on Brad Holder's Facebook page or social media pages. I don't know if it did describe Facebook, but it was social media pages. Do you guys have that? Because we didn't get it. We had been playing that game for quite a while, and I was tired of it, and I did not want to play that game anymore. And so I thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to locate Ryan Boucher. Matt Hoffman did a great job of that. And then we drove down to Georgia, and he put up on his computer all the stuff that he sent to Trooper Winters, and there it was. And it blew my mind when I saw it. I'm like, holy cow. I can't even believe that was on his Facebook page. A similar image to what the crime scene looked like from the boyfriend's dad, Abby's boyfriend's dad, on his Facebook page with everything else. That's a mind blower. So,
no nexus, Andy. No nexus.
No nexus. Of course not.
Yeah.
Well, the reason that was important is that then we took that photo and we then deposed Roland Purdy, who was a state trooper who also investigated Brad Holder in the Odinism angle. He had his own offshoot thing going on for a very short period of time. And I showed it to him. I said, you ever seen this? And he said, yes. By the way, that was a huge moment. Like, this is a moment where lawyers are inside freaking out. Okay. Because I need foundation. And all the foundation I think that I need is if any officer says, yeah, I've seen that on Brad Holder's Facebook page. So I put that in front of her. I said, yeah, you were investigating Brad Holder at some point in time. Did you ever see this? Yeah, I saw that on his Facebook page. So inside, I'm jumping for joy because now I know that's getting into evidence, presumably thinking that we were going to be able to get third-party suspect stuff in. So I'm very excited about that. That's why I had to go drive down there, because had I not done that, then I would never have had it. And I had to get I had to get it from Ryan Boucher because he's the one that sent it originally up to Lafayette. So that gave it, that gave me at least another indicia of reliability that is what Purdy saw. Well, Winters, the guy that Boucher, the guy from Georgia, was communicating with, when I asked Winters, where is this photo? I showed it to him and he's like, I don't know if I remember that. He was playing a little coy. I didn't care for it, honestly, but I'm trying to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. And I said, well, what happened to it? And he's like, it's kind of lost. There's some lady and she might know where it is. And that's it. This is a piece of evidence that looks like the crime scene, that nobody knew anything what the crime scene looked like. And it's on somebody's Facebook page that has a direct connection to the girls. And they lost that as well.
Yeah, you're being kind because he completely backtracked.
Well,
Winters completely, he pretended like he had never seen the thing. He didn't even know what you were talking about. He's like, I don't know what that is. What is that?
I think you're right about that in the deposition.
Because that was during the 3 days of hearings.
Well, you're actually talking about Purdy. What happened was Roland Purdy. So we filed another motion to dismiss because we found other evidence that was missing, including that. And so we had another hearing on that. And I think it was on July 30th, Roland Purdy came in and I showed him the photo again. And I said, and he's already admitted under oath that he saw it on Brad Holder's Facebook page. And then July 30th, we're in a motion to dismiss. I think that's what it was. Do you see this? Trooper Purdy? Yeah. And that was on Brad Holder's Facebook page. Yes. That's July 30th. Now the big hearing, the big daddy hearing is August 1st. That's third party suspect hearing. That's where it was it was really, in my opinion, incredibly poorly handled by the judge, because it was a free for all. Like, you got basically 8 hours to get this done. And we're just throwing evidence in, and poor Stacy and Mark, who are doing the appeal. I'm going to have to sit down with them for a week and go through that, because thankfully I was putting little notes on there about where the important information was and kind of what it was, because I didn't feel like Judge Gall was really going to take the time to go through that. I don't want to cast aspersions there, but I just didn't think that was it was, it would be hard to do. She had a lot of things to do, and so during that crazy frenzied time. We're just like, I'm Judge, I moved to admit exhibits 187. This is an interview of Elvis Fields on October the 10th, 2018. And what's relevant about this is this. I mean, it's the transcript's out there. I don't even know what it says, but my brain was going like, I just wanted it in for the record. Yeah. I kind of had a feeling the way that Judge was going to rule on this. I absolutely did not agree with it, but I kind of saw the writing on the wall, even though in the famous October 19th hearing, I said, I'm not great at reading between the lines. I was great at reading between those lines. I didn't feel it was a very strong chance she was going to give us the third party suspect stuff. So we're just putting in this evidence. Well, in the middle of all that, Nick McClellan comes up to me and says, yeah, I'm going to put Roland Purdy back on the stand. Okay. Again, if you're all paying attention, Roland Purdy under oath, deposition. Yes. The faked mimicked crime scene I saw that on Brad Holder's social media page when I was investigating Brad Holder. On July 30th, just 2 days earlier, did you see this on Brad Holder's social media page? Yes, that's the Roland Purdy that I'm talking about. So Nick McClellan was like, I need to put him on the stand. I'm like, okay, we're just calling people out of order, and it's just a free for all. So he gets on the stand. I'm just sitting there. I have no idea what it's going to be. And he's like, you've had a chance to rethink. I don't remember, it's out there, whatever the transcript says. Did you have a chance, Trooper Purdy, to think about that what they're calling the mimicked crime scene photo? Yes, I have. What have you thought about that? I don't know that I ever saw that on anything. I mean, I'm kind of looking back on it now, and my cross exam was like, so you're telling me that on deposition you said this was on Brad Holder's Facebook page? Yes. 2 days ago, under oath, same, like you were in deposition. You saw it on Brad Holder's Facebook page. Yes. But today, on this most important day, where we're trying to convince this judge, now I didn't say that exactly this way, when we're trying to convince the judge that the third party suspect evidence should come in, and this is a big part of that, you're now saying that you don't remember. And see what that's that foundation that I was talking about. That made my heart jump joy when I did the deposition. He said, yeah, I saw that on his Facebook page. See, what it looks like is that the prosecution knew that was a major problem for them. And even Judge Gall might have to say, there's a nexus there when a guy whose son dated Abby Williams has an image that is similar to the crime scene that nobody knew about on his Facebook page for no reason that anybody can understand, as well as everything else, the rune that's on his hand and all that. Even Judge Gall, with that mimicked crime scene photo, might have to give us third-party suspect evidence. So what it looks like to me is, let's take that foundation away from Andy Baldwin and the defense. And, what a normal situation might be, I'm not saying all judges would do this, Bob, but I know judges that would. They'd say, you've got some explaining to do, pal, Trooper Purdy.
Right.
You've testified under oath 2 times, and now you're changing your story. I want to know why. Let's have a hearing on that. I mean, those are the types of things when you're trying to find the truth, it looks shady as hell. And it's why there's so much, conspiracy, if you want to say, about everything that's going on here is because of things like that. Things like Jerry Holman on August 10th saying that this has nothing to do with Odinism. Things like the Purdue professor being, we're never going to be able to find him. All of that stuff, all you people that are watching that are like, oh, Andy Baldwin's full of crap and the defense is full of crap. Can you just take a moment and do some self-reflection about everything that I've just said? Can you please do that? I try to self-reflect. I know that I screwed up a lot on this case. Okay. I know there's a lot of things that I could have done differently. I want you all out there that are opposed to Richard Allen to at least try to be honest with yourselves and have an honest conversation about missing evidence, Brad Holder's phone that was allegedly never dumped, a key witness, all of that. Just think about all of that and just say, man, didn't Richard Allen, a citizen of the United States, a citizen of Indiana, deserve better than that? And even though I think that he's guilty, that's what these people might say, he didn't deserve Purdy getting up on the stand and changing his story at a very important hearing after he's said something different under oath 2 times. He didn't deserve the Purdue professor situation. That's just weird. I'd like that as a citizen. I'd want that investigated. I want to honor what the others, there's a faction out there that believe that Richard Allen is guilty. And like I said before, I have no problem with that, but be intellectually honest, just be intellectually honest. So yeah. Let me just go through my real quick list of things just so we did.
Fire away, my friend. Fire away.
Police give up on Norse paganism. Still don't know why police gave up on Norse paganism. Have no idea why that was dropped.
Well, in light of what we heard from Turco actually saying, it's inexplicable. Because I'm friends with Kevin Murphy. I met him throughout the course of this whole thing, and the man is like Kevin Murphy is the guy that you want as a cop. That's who he is. He's got that type of integrity. He's as truthful as the day is long. The dude doesn't have a dishonest bone in his body. And I'm telling you that. And he always he'll text me after this. He's like, thanks, Bob. I'm like, Murph, I'm just speaking the truth, man.
He's such an honorable guy. I mean, I have
these 3 cops, man, that continued this investigation weren't some kind of bottom feeder Barney Fife dudes. These guys were decorated, long-term cops who all were highly, highly respected. They all had a very different view, and it all harkens back to the fact of what you talked about, where Todd Click was so upset that they had arrested Richard Allen, that the man hired an attorney because he didn't know how to deal with the fact that my mind's blown. What is happening? Did you not see the work that we did on this? Have you not tendered this to the defense? That the man hired a lawyer to figure it out, and then subsequently, right on the eve of trial, Todd Click gets arrested for something that he was doing with Department of Children and Family Services, whatever they call it in Indiana. He had left the police force for reasons unknown. I have a feeling it probably was he was very disenchanted about things that had gone on. So it just when you look at things from the 30,000 foot view, and again, if you're being intellectually honest, you have to ask yourself, why are these things happening? If you've got a strong case against Richard Allen, why all the games?
Yes.
Why all the bullshit? Why the destruction of evidence, whether it was intentional, accidental? I don't know. But either way, it's inexcusable.
No.
You don't lose 70 interviews from the most critical days of the investigation that vanish in thin air, whether it was recorded over. I don't know what happened to him, but it's inexplicable. There's no reasonable, rational explanation. The man was railroaded, period. You can feel any way you want about his innocence or guilt. The problem is the investigation was a train wreck. And what that's left, the people that believe that Richard Allen is innocent, is no recourse because they didn't do the job on the front end. They come and they find this file 5 years later. The amazing Kathy Shank, or whatever her name is, Shank woman, the nice little lady that they paraded out and was in every photo op, oddly, from everything that I saw with the trial. You know, like Kathy Shank was in every single picture, standing up behind the podium. You know, like Richard Allen had volunteered that information, and then they come up with the unspent casing, which we haven't even scratched.
Yeah, let me give you a real bird's eye view on that. For those watching, I thought they did a good job on the Hulu special of kind of dividing up into what the grounds were, what we were up against. Number one was the timeline, and we've talked a lot about that. There's still a lot more to talk about, but move on to that. We haven't talked about the ballistics. First of all, in Oregon a few weeks ago, they have basically thrown out this looking at bullets and comparing it to a gun. That is junk science. We weren't allowed to bring in junk science. There's a new case actually that came out of, I think it's the U.S. Supreme Court, that says that I just learned this at NACDL, that the judge should have allowed us to have a hearing on that. And if she didn't, that's a problem. And we had an expert that was going to come in and call it junk science. We weren't allowed to bring that expert in. We did have an expert that was critical of the way that they handled, the law enforcement, state police handled the bullet and how they conducted the testing. Okay, so here's a crash course, very, very quick on this particular case. They claim that there is a bullet found at the scene, an unspent round. That means that it was never fired, this bullet. The theory that they espoused, the law enforcement said their theory was that Richard cocked the gun and a bullet flew out and fell on the ground. He didn't pick it up. This is their theory. And then, because, that's just their theory. And so they then go to this house, they find a gun with the search warrant. That's what we were trying to use the Franks memo for, to throw that gun out. That's what that's all about. And I hope that the Court of Appeals really looks into that Franks memo, by the way. Normally that's a hard sell, but man, there's a lot there. Anyway, they get the gun, and here's what they do. They purportedly take the bullet that they found purportedly at the scene, and now it's in an evidence baggie or whatever, allegedly. I didn't see it, or it was in an envelope or something. And they take a pristine bullet, and they take Rick's gun, his Sig Sauer, and they cycle it through to mimic what they, in their theory of what happened and how that bullet ended up near the girls, they wanted to, of course, that's the right way to do it, right? Let's mimic what they say happened. It would not be proper to fire it because it wasn't a fired round of ammunition. It was cycled through and ejected. So that's what they did. So they ejected this pristine bullet to then compare it to the bullet that they found. And so obviously that bullet that they tested matched the bullet, right? No, it did not. It did not match that bullet because when they cycled it through, it did not have the same, it did not have deep enough marks for them to make a proper analysis. That should be the end of it, by the way, if you think about it. Now, you don't even have to think about it. Let's do exactly what we think happened, eject it out. Oh, when this gun ejects out a bullet, it doesn't produce any lines in it. That's the end of the story. I can't compare it to this other bullet because obviously whatever gun was ejected that bullet out, it did show up on that bullet, but it didn't show up on this bullet. That we did it. So we did our testing. That's the end of it. Does that make sense to everybody? I hope.
Yeah. So, I mean, an unspent casing is apples and a fired round is oranges.
So what they had to do was they had to shoot Rick's gun, the Sig Sauer, and a bullet came out, and all this pressure is inside of the gun. And so all the tools inside of the gun are now scraping at in a more pressurized environment and are deeper. And then they took that bullet from a shotgun, from a gun that was shot, and compared it to an unspent bullet that had been cycled through. Apples, as you said, Bob, apples and oranges. And that's how they did it. And you looked at it with your own eyeball and you could see that it didn't match. That's my opinion. And apples and oranges doesn't work. And to me, it was just much more simple than that. If that gun, and I would say this at the next trial, and I, in some ways, maybe making it more simple
Yeah.
My wife's going to get mad because she's like, why are you telling your strategy if you're going to get back on? That's fair. That's fair. If Brad's on it, he's never going to let me do the ballistics.
Forgive him, Michelle. Forgive him.
but what I would say is actually the most simple way to do it is this. If you extract the bullet out of Rick's gun and it doesn't have the same markings as the bullet that was extracted out of that you see here, then this bullet was extracted out of a different gun. There's nothing else more to say about it.
That's it.
And yet we had a day of testimony on that. Brad Rosie was brilliant in his prep work. It was really inspiring to watch him. I mean,
and it was really a day from Oberg, who just was adamant that the jury not look at the pictures, because she kept saying, and I look, all the transcripts of the trial are out there. I highly recommend that everybody go look at both the direct and the cross of Melissa Oberg, who was the lab tech who did the testing, who was never wrong. People that are around her are wrong all the time, but she's never been wrong, ever. That's who you're dealing with. But when it came down to actually being able to look, and we're talking about the jurors, at this significant, or what do they call it? What's the term for it? Significant agreement, or
a substantial agreement. I don't remember.
Whatever it is. And she's adamant about them not putting the pictures up, because she says, I don't want you to look at the pictures, because that's just merely one snapshot of everything that I was looking at to come to my conclusion. And I don't want you looking at it and making your own comparisons, because that is not the totality of what I looked at. And I'm like, what in the hell? Like, it was literally a woman saying, trust me, bro.
Yes.
It matched. And that was it. That was her testimony. And Brad, like you said, I thought he did a phenomenal job, destroying her up on there. And I don't know. I thought that Brad did such a good job. And the one juror that I heard from, it sounded as if, to me, they found that was inconsequential.
Yeah.
But really, at the end of the day, that the bullet wasn't the thing, that ultimately they landed on the fact that they said the bridge guy did it, and they proved that Rick Allen's bridge guy. Like that, that was what I took from that one juror that I've heard. And I'm like, wow, man, scary. It's scary, scary stuff.
Somebody told me about that. I didn't listen to it. I think I would have been, it's hard related to the jury. It is hard to understand how they didn't see reasonable doubt. I know that it's a big case. I don't want to get angry about it. Jennifer's been very, very good and gracious in saying, hey, we're not mad about it. I'm not. I just respectfully, completely 100% disagree. There was reasonable doubt. And, but part of that is on us, honestly, on the defense. That's us. We could have done a lot better job on the timeline. Big time. That was on me. That was part of what my responsibilities were. So I own that, and I have to get over it. It's like I told a client today who just can't get over the fact he screwed up something, and I just looked at him. I said, man, you got to get over that. Just get over it. Your life's going to be better. You're doing better. Everybody makes mistakes. I don't want to have you come back in here. Let that go, brother. And I have to say that to myself too. So that is not the jury's fault. That is my fault. And we needed to do better. So one last thing I wanted to say, and I don't say that lightly. I'm not trying to be dramatic. It's just a fact. We have to do better. And I particularly do. One thing I wanted to say on the Hulu special, there's a 207, the famous 207 photo. I don't think we talked about this, but this is something that where I failed on my cross to Jerry Holman. I got a lot of accolades for Holman's cross after it was over, and you're feeling all kind of good about it and whatnot. I left a lot of meat on the bone there, big time. And I was just analyzing the jury, and I thought that they had had enough. It was on a Saturday morning, I remember. I don't always get my dates and days right, but I do remember that Saturday. I don't remember the exact date. And I felt like the jury was getting out at noon. I did not want to go on. I had pounded on him for a while. I thought I had made my point. But one of the areas of cross that I could have come through better, and it's not really about him using him as a vehicle to show to tell a story about why the 2:07 photo. What I mean by that, there's a photo taken at 2:07 p.m. on Libby's phone. Yeah, let's look at that. Thank you.
Let's look at it.
So there it is. So this phone, the one on the left, which is just the plain bridge, that was taken at 2:05, and it was disseminated on Libby's Snapchat. And the one there is at 2:07. So look there, she's close to halfway across the bridge there. And way at the end, you'll see like two little posts. So let me explain what you're looking at here. Thank you for putting that up.
Wait, hold on. I didn't mean to. I was trying to blow it up some.
Okay.
Let me get it back up. All right. Okay.
So this photo was taken at 2:07 p.m. on Libby's phone. All right. And the way that the camera angle is Libby, who presumably took the photo. I mean, I don't know for sure, but it makes sense. She is back farther. Okay. And Libby is at the south end of the bridge where the abduction happened. So she's pointing the camera toward the north end of the bridge where the girls came from and where Richard Allen would have been, standing when Betsy Blair saw him. So behind, that's Abby there, by the way. And if you go all behind Abby, that is the direction that the girls came from. Hopefully that makes sense. Where
right.
Abby is.
So this
Yes.
end here, where if you look way back there, that's where the state is alleging that everybody walks through. So when you come through the trail system, all right, through the ways where you're not trespassing on other people's property, when you come through, and whether it's the Mears entrance or now there's the Freedom Bridge, you walk through the trails and then eventually you hit this bridge, which is the Monon High Bridge. And what the state's theory has always been is that the girls walked across this bridge. You had Betsy Blair at some point who sees a man. And if you see these things that are sticking out, like jagging out on the right and the left, those are the platforms. So if you're hearing about platforms, those things were obviously back when trains ran on these tracks. If there was somebody out there working on the tracks and a train was coming, they had to have somewhere to step out so as they didn't get killed. So that's what those platforms. Now, if you look way back on what will be our left side of the picture, you can see one of those things sticking out. Now, presumably that would be the platform that Betsy Blair would have said that she saw. Remember what Andy told you. Betsy saw, she was leaving the trails, okay? And she came out there almost daily because that was where she worked out. That's why she had her Garmin, that she knew how many steps she had taken. She knew what time it was. She was a very credible witness. And the way Andy said it, we're going to put up this witness, Betsy Blair. You're going to like her. And she was a very likable witness. But where she said that she saw the person would have been on that platform way in the background there. You can see it sticking out on the left side.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, I think it's because it's transposed on the screen, but actually Rick, where they claim Rick was on the opposite side.
Right, because it's probably right. Like,
yeah, I think it's transposed.
Right.
I think that I heard something about that in the Karen Reed case, something about in a garage, there was a transposed thing that the police, was there something going on there?
Inverted. The inverted video.
Yeah, they did some shady business there.
Yeah.
But I don't think this is shady. I mean, so yeah, thank you, Bob. So what behind you, and if you get a close-up version of this, you will see at the very end, you'll see these two posts sticking up. And don't confuse those as people. That is not people.
That is not
Those are
people.
posts way at the very back. Keep going, Bob. Yeah, all the way back there.
Every time I try to click on that particular photograph, it won't let me zoom in. Let me see. Let me see if I can get a different one where I can zoom in.
Yeah, let's see about that one.
So let me see. This is one that took place. All right, let me keep going here. It's the Indy Star one that's just not working right.
Well, at the very, put your cue there, Bob, at the very back.
Here.
Okay, so yeah, so that's where the girls came from. Okay, is where that cue is, and back there, if you see a close-up version on the internet or whatever, you'll see two. It looks like maybe you're not really sure what it is, but it's two posts. or maybe 3. That was to prevent cars from coming onto the tracks or golf carts or whatever.
Right.
So that's not people. And that's kind of important because of what some of you already, most of you out there already know what I'm about to say. You figured it out before I did. And that is this. The state's theory, remember, is that Richard Allen is following these girls on the high bridge, that Betsy Blair had seen them at that end where Bob's, the cue was a minute ago, that these girls passed Richard Allen. That's their theory. And then he followed them. So now they're close to halfway across this bridge. And my question to everyone is, where is Richard Allen? Where is
anybody?
Where is Richard Allen? 5'5" Richard Allen with tiny feet Richard Allen, as these girls are almost halfway across this bridge. I mean, from that angle, you can see the water underneath there. And they have quite a head start. So why would Richard Allen have, I mean, you could theorize that he went into hiding or something, but Bob, as you talked about earlier, on the left side of the bridge, as we're looking at it, that's a straight drop on that end. So if Richard Allen were going to hide, he could not hide there because he would fallen down 170 feet or whatever.
Yeah.
On the right side
right there
is where you're talking about, Bob, earlier, that you would go up a hill. That's on that same side that the girls were found. And now, again, it's weird because it's transposed, so I might be getting my sides mixed up. But as you're looking down that direction, if in the real world, on the right would be up the hill, and that's the same, and then up a hill and then down, and that's down, 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 and that's where the girls were found. On the left is a straight drop down. So if Richard Allen is hiding, he would have had to have been hiding on the right side where that hill is, and then he'd have some time to make up, because these girls have a big lead. And Richard Allen, with his tiny little feet and these huge cracks in this bridge, that was so dangerous that Doug Carter, the superintendent of Indiana State Police, very, dramatically said, and I believe him, he's just a dramatic guy, but he said, I crawled across that bridge because I wanted to do that for Abby and Libby or whatever, something along those lines. But he had to crawl across the bridge because it was so scary. That is true. It is scary. Now, when you're Abby and Libby's age and teenager age, yeah, there's a good photo.
So there's a good aerial view. So these are the platforms that we're talking about. And this is, on this side is the south side of the bridge where the state.
Yeah, that's the south side. Where
this is the south side. So unfortunately, yeah.
Okay. Right. So I'm sorry to interrupt you there. The question is, where's Richard Allen? And then if you that's 2:07 p.m. So 6 minutes later is when the video is taken, right? 6 minutes. So Richard Allen, who's not in that scene, he would have had to make time to catch up to the girls. Richard Allen was 5'5", as we've said. Doug Carter said he has to crawl across there. It's so dangerous. Others would say the same, and I understand it. And if you were ever on there, you would know what they mean, because there's big gaping holes in there, and your feet, if you got little feet like Rick, they could get caught in there. And on top of that, Rick Allen was at least at that point in time, pack a day smoker. So when you see the bridge guy, what they call the bridge guy video, what you don't see is a guy doubled over, like this guy here would be doubled over if I had to catch up with those girls. And I don't even smoke cigarettes. And, Richard Allen having to catch up with them, you would expect to see, if that were the case, because at the 2:07 photo that we're looking at, you don't see Richard Allen there. So he has to catch up, and then he's going to be tired, and he's not going to be walking very casually like you see on that video. That's my own opinion. I mean, others could debate that.
What time did Betsy say that she saw the man? What time was she?
It was about, she got there, I think, at 1:46. It was about 1:52.
Okay. So, and again, she is a highly credible person, and she passes the girls.
Yes.
Okay, so remember, Betsy sees somebody on one of these platforms.
A 20-year-old.
Okay,
Yes.
towards the north end, the young poofy-haired kid, and he's not there. The girls have passed her. She's walking out north because she's leaving. I think
Yes.
I don't know if that was the time that she left to go to the bathroom and came back, or if that was the time that
No,
she left.
She went and took another route, and then she ended up getting in her car. And at 2:14, that's when she saw the old comet out there. So
The question becomes truly, if Betsy had passed the girls and she had just left somebody standing, the young guy that she claimed that she saw, and again, she's read her testimony. Go into the transcripts and read her testimony for yourself. Don't trust what we're saying, but she's unequivocal. Okay, so where is that person?
where is that guy?
So the girls have walked past. Betsy has gone the other direction. We can assume that where Abby's at, that it took her that long from the time that Betsy says that she passes the girls and she sees the person and she leaves the trail, or she goes onto the trail to leave, that it took Abby that long to get there, and Libby, who's back off screen here taking this picture, that long till 2:07 to get to that point. Where is anybody in this picture?
Yeah, there's a lot of debate about this photo. I mean, there's a lot of conjecture, a lot of conspiracy about her shoes and stuff like that. But I've kind of come to believe, at some point in time, I had to go down those rabbit holes. I've kind of come to believe, I'm willing to consider anything still, but I've come to believe that photo is legit. And I could be wrong on that, but yeah, where Bob, where is it? Now, if the guy on the platform with the brown poofy hair, the 20-year-old, if he followed Betsy Blair out and just like, I'm done here, whatever I'm doing, I'm going to head back home. I'm going to follow that lady, not to do anything, but just to, she's leaving. I'm going to leave too. Then maybe Abby and Libby passed that guy also. And that's why you don't see anybody. And Richard Allen, of course, is gone by this time. I mean, his car is not at the CPS lot. Betsy Blair knows that. And Richard Allen left at 1:15, 1:30. He's gone. So that's why you're not going to see him. So here's the payout, like why I'm talking about this. And some of the jury, I think that one of the jurors actually asked a really great question that this is where I failed with my Jerry Holman cross and maybe a couple of other crosses to express this. I did it a little bit, but here's what I think happened. And this makes way more sense. You don't see anybody there, just like you pointed out, Bob. You don't, on the video, the guy is not huffing and puffing. He's very casual. So here's what I think happened. When there were multiple people, at least one person, but I think multiple people at the south end of the bridge where the abduction happened. And there's places to hide. There's places, or maybe they weren't even hiding. I don't know. And I think what makes a lot more sense is when the girls came close to the south end of the bridge, the very end of the bridge, one person got on the bridge, walked toward Abby and Libby, then turned around. And that's what caught their attention to turn on the video, because this guy was walking. And now this guy's not huffing and puffing. He's very casual, that guy on that video. And he turned around and then he started following them. He hadn't come from the other end.
I agree.
You're looking at the 207 right now. We call it the 207. You're looking right at it. There's nobody in the shot. And so that makes a lot more sense to me, that somebody with multiple people were at the other end. You can't see through the camera that Libby, the camera work that she did, presuming it's her, that doesn't go a panoramic all the way around. So you don't know who else was there. And now you go down at that end of the bridge, there's an access road, as people, that wasn't talked about in the Hulu special, but right, if you go down the hill 30 feet or so, there is an access road. And if you walk that access road, you get to Brad Weber's house, and there's a bunch of outbuildings there as well. And so there's lots of possibilities. The phone, the Fitbit on the phone shows that there was some movement with the phone for a while. And, but once it's in a car, then it doesn't record movement. And so there's all these kind of variations of what could have happened. But when we get back to the,
I've always thought what makes the most sense is exactly what you said. And if you think of it in terms of, because what Andy's saying is that whoever the guy is that's in that photograph, the thing that makes the most sense if you're using common sense, because there's nobody in that photograph that we're looking at 207, is that he came from the South and that he passed both girls. He first would have passed Libby. Maybe he says, "Hey, how you doing?" Whatever. And then passes Abby. And then at some point, as Abby continues to go forward, he turns around and starts walking towards them. Exactly as it. This is the thing that makes the most sense. And when you think about, when you listen to him say, "Guys, down the hill," it's almost as if they had made they had made an acquaintance, just like girls or whatever would have happened when he passed by, just some kind of nicety, like, because there seems to me, and again, like, obviously I've thought about this case a lot. We are all allowed to think our own things. There seems to be kind of a familiarity in the way that he says, "Guys, down the hill." So to me, it makes sense because he's coming from the South. He passes the girls, he turns around, and then he starts walking back, because nothing else makes sense in terms of looking at the timing of this photograph. And I've heard all the stuff about it, and like, the mystery of where this thing was. It wasn't found on Libby's phone.
Indy Cindy there says, "Why doesn't Libby's phone show the Snapchat app?" I think that is, I don't remember. That's Jennifer Auger's kind of bailiwick, and I don't remember. There was some question about why, it just is odd that the Snapchat just kind of appears out of nowhere. I don't think the state police liked, my opinion is I'm not sure that they really, when I was asking in depositions about this photo, it was kind of mum. The mum was the word. And now I think I'm opining here, but I think they know that this video or this photograph does not help them for all the reasons we were just talking about.
Right.
Nobody's behind them. And at the South end, it just makes way more sense what you just said, Bob. And we, again, through cross-examination, this is where one of my failures, like on Jerry Holman, I could have just put that photo up and said, well, first I would set it up with, so your theory is this, and I'd go through the theory. Richard Allen followed the girls. They passed him at the north end, and then he followed them all the way to the south end. That's, that he walked across that bridge. Yeah. Here, I'm showing you the 207 photo, which is exhibit 57 or whatever. Where's Richard Allen? Where's Richard Allen? And, normally you don't ask open-ended questions unless maybe that would backfire. I don't know. I'd have to think that through. But at the other end, you could then like Detective or Lieutenant Holman, isn't it possible? And then you could actually physically show what happened. Like I could have brought Brad up and Jennifer up, and they could have portrayed Abby and Libby. And I said, and I could have been the guy at the other end of the bridge that you're talking about. And I could have walked right past them and shown that visually to the jury so they can really capture that in their brain. That would have been a really terrific thing to do. That could have, they could have gone into the jury room and thought, I still can't get over the fact that there's nobody on that 207 video behind, or photo behind. And that's what the state's saying. We should see Richard Allen there, but we don't see him there. And the guy's not huffing and puffing and he's acting casual. I like the way that was demonstrated. That's something that we could have done differently. And, I don't want to keep doing the regrets.
There's no point in it at this point.
There isn't. It's more about just next time. And again, my wife's going to be mad. Well, now they're going to be prepared for that. Well, you know what? The truth is the truth. And sometimes I'm a very transparent attorney. I have my strategies, and I will, hold on to some of those strategies from time to time. But all the prosecutors that I deal with all around the state that know me, for the most part, as I've said before, I think to you, here's what I say to them. Here's how I'm going to try this case. This is exactly how. Now, there's a couple things I'm going to hold back, but for the most part, this is what we're going to do. Good luck to you. And the reason I do it that way, and I'm nice about it, and we have a joke about it and stuff, is I'm trying to get a case resolved. And if they fear that they're going to lose at trial, and you can convince them of the possibility, at least, that it could happen, then you get a deal done. Perhaps if a deal is worthy of being done, if they're innocent, then you go to trial. But you know, what I'm doing right now and what Michelle might be angry at me about is revealing some information is probably not much different than it will be if I ever get back on the case. Although that is probably not true as I just say it, because on this, it depends on who the prosecutors are and who the judge is. If we had a different prosecutor, I might handle this differently if I knew the prosecutor and could trust them, you know. And that's like, again, the whole going down to Georgia thing. It would have been nice to have a prosecutor or law enforcement. Sometimes you deal as a defense lawyer or trial lawyer, you're dealing with directly with law enforcement. You know, I love good cops, by the way. One of my favorite thing on the planet Earth.
They're
great
awesome.
Cops, honest cops, cops that care. And I think that is the vast majority of them, by the way. I think they're honest, you know, they do make mistakes though. And we have to keep them just like they have to keep us, but we have to keep them, make sure that they're doing their jobs and doing it well. And the best compliment that I can get as a trial lawyer, and it happened in a murder case a couple of years ago in Brown County, where I just pummeled this guy on the stand. Great guy. He wants to be a better cop. And he came up to me afterwards and said, thank you. I think I've told that story. I mean, it's happened multiple times in my career, but that was a big case. And, you know, you feel badly for him as he's taking the shots up there. But when he comes up to you and says, you made me a better police officer today. Thank you. And that guy and I are still friends. And
it's heartening, you know, I mean, because it's a dangerous, thankless job, and we need good people doing it, you know, and like you said, good cops are just amazing. Like that's why I'm saying, like when I got to know Kevin Murphy, and I just realized what just a good man he is, like above everything else, you know, like we all have jobs, but in terms of like how you're going to perform in a job, in terms of your humanity and your integrity, there's few jobs that those two things matter more than being a police officer. And Murph is one of those guys. That's why when I read things that he wrote, they have weight for me. You know what I mean? Because I know who he is as a man. And, you know, so yeah, man, it's well,
the last thing I will say is that just because I'm going through my notes here, yesterday Holman said that when he was very dismissive of the Odinist stuff, one thing that was directly off of the show, the Hulu show, he says we can't even show that Holder and Westfall were in Delphi, and that's just not true. Now Holder, maybe there's an alibi there, and don't want to get into that. But Westfall, he was in. Not only he admits that he was in Delphi, very close to he's within miles of where the murders happened. And I'm not saying that he had anything to do with this, by the way, but he was a suspect. I appreciated him saying very much, Patrick Westfall, that this is lawyers. They have to do what they have to do. And I appreciate that, and I hope he means that. But when Jerry Holman is on a show saying we can't even show that they were in Delphi, that's just not accurate, And I'll give him a break too, Holman, because we all say things that are inaccurate from time to time when we're on a show like this. And I may have said something inaccurate. I try not to, but when you're freestyling like we do, then sometimes that happens. Yeah. So, you guys that are going to be picking apart all my words, that's fine. You guys that don't like the defense, again, I respect you, but I don't listen to or read anything. And I don't, anybody that likes the defense side, I'm sorry to tell you, I still don't read or look into that as well. Once we're back on the case, if we're fortunate enough, if God blesses us that way, then I'm going to have a different approach with the people that watch this show and other shows that want to help us out. I just got to figure out how to do it. And so have some grace for me on that. I know that there's people upset about that. We didn't use that, and they're right. They should be. And I just asked for some grace because it was weird. It's a weird world we're living in. I've done this 30 years. When I started, there was carbon copies. Okay. I mean, we've come a long way, baby. And I'm trying the best I can. So,
yeah. And I'm going to make two comments in terms of you were more gracious about the prosecutors, Brett and Alice, than I will be. They talk about this concept that, Brad Holder had an excellent alibi. Well, his alibi works if you're to believe the state's timeline. that's the only time his alibi works.
That's an easy way to say it, isn't it?
That's an easy way to say it. And
yeah,
the other
and
thing,
if there's multiple people involved, then it doesn't matter as well.
right?
You know,
I mean, because the one thing that we didn't talk about with Brad Holder was this bizarre post that he makes from the gym at 2 a.m, where he says, "I've never my adrenaline or my testosterone, whatever he says, has never been higher." It was just, that was the night of.
Yeah, and by the way, when I deposed Brad Holder, I asked him about that post. Okay, so for those who don't know, I'll give you the context here. So the girls were missing on the 13th, going into the 14th. So around 2:30 a.m., Brad Holder posts a Facebook post, and he says, I'm at the gym. I'm all pumped up. I've got high testosterone. And, the way I kind of viewed it was, here's what really was going on. Hey, it might have been going on. Hey, everybody, I'm at the gym. I'm not in the forest. I'm not here. I'm not here. Here's where I'm not. I'm here at the gym. You remember our theory is that the girls, were brought back around 4:33 a.m. But I'm at the gym. But when I deposed Brad Holder, I said, how many times had you been at the gym at 2 a.m.? He had been at the gym, I think, there was some evidence that he had been at the gym at 4 p.m., 4:30 p.m., 5 p.m., or somebody had swiped his thing. But how many times, Brad Holder, have you been to the gym at 2 a.m., 2:30 a.m. in your life? Never, he said. Never before. So the one night that he's at the gym is the night that this all happened. Again, I don't know what happened. And God knows what happened. And the rest of us are trying to figure it out. And until somebody is able to come out with definitiveness and evidence, it's all guesswork. And whether it's Brad Holder or Patrick Westfall or Elvis Fields or Ron Logan or Kegan Kline, all those third-party suspects that we wanted to have the opportunity to talk to the jury about, I don't know whether any of them were involved in anything at all. If they were accused of this crime, any of them, I would have represented them, because this is what I do. I'm a trial lawyer.
Yeah.
And I would have represented them, and I would have picked holes in their case. Okay. But I was representing Richard Allen, and I was poking a hole in the state's case against him. And they're caught in the crossfire because they were suspects. There's no question about that early on. And there's a lot of evidence that supports why they were suspects, and we should have been able to talk about it. And for all you guys, again, that are being intellectually honest, I hope that you agree, and you should agree.
Yeah. I mean, what else can you say? All right, my friend. It was.
Thank you, everyone.
Sorry,
another freaking marathon with you, Bob.
I
still got to get up to Chicago to talk to you, to have some dinner and.
Yeah, music, dinner. You're supposed to bring Michelle up on dinner and music. That's our plan.
All right. Until next time, and thank you guys, and get out there and watch that Hulu special. Nobody's telling me to promote this. I think it gives a great overview. I wouldn't be saying nice things about it if I didn't believe that. And then maybe down the road we can get a different group to do the more of a defense oriented side. I just want to get this credibility out there. Was important to me for those people in the middle that don't know what's going on. I wanted a journalistic approach. There's nothing wrong with the way that other people do it, by the way, but I wanted journalism, ABC News. I just thought that was a great way to do it. I thought they did a great job. Hannah Shakespeare and Grace Miller. Grace Miller was a producer. She was just great to deal with. And I thought she did a great job, and all those people that were involved, class act all the way around. It's a weird world we're living in. I've never in a million years would have imagined I'd be on a podcast, YouTube thing with Bob Mata or in a Hulu special. I mean, all that stuff is crazy to me. I'm still trying to grasp that. But in the end, I just want Richard Allen freed because he's innocent.
That's it. All right, brother.
Thank you, guys.
Go home. Kiss your wife. All right, so there it is. I know you guys had a bunch of chats. I put every single one of them up. I'm sure Andy saw them, and most of them are geared towards him. And I'm gonna ask him, hey, go through, read some of the supers, and if you get, because I know Catastrophe was asking a lot of questions that were, but I think whatever may have happened in a trial, trials are hard, mistakes are made. Andy any lawyer that you talk to that tries a case, if you'd end up not walking out of that courtroom with your client being found not guilty, is going to think that they've made mistakes. They're going to believe that they made mistakes. And, that every lawyer feels that. So Andy's never one to shy away from that kind of stuff. And I think under the circumstances, in terms of the time frame that was allowed, every one of those lawyers worked themselves to death and put their heart and soul into it. And, if and when there's a second shot, and they're the attorneys, it's nice to get a second bite. I mean, look what happened with Karen and the team, and look how differently they tried that case from the defense side of it. So, and in that case, I was screaming that they do it exactly the way they did it the second trial, and they did, and it was the correct result. So, all right, I've been on for a long time. I am on the the ass end of my trip here. Thank you for everybody who sent in supers with your questions. I got them all up. I'd love to read them all. I put them up, but I got to eat. I'm not going to lie, because we got on. It's been 4 hours. To my mods, thank you. I'm sure it was an interesting night. You guys are the best. I love you. Mandy and Tracy, thank you. I adore both of you. And we'll see if I'm going to do anything tomorrow. I don't know. I have talked to Dave Yannetti. He is definitely coming on. I think we're going to push it probably until not next week, the week after. He's got a couple things that he's doing. So he'll be coming on. And then I'm hoping actually to get Hannah on here. Sounds like she's going to be willing to come on, and we'll talk to her. Any questions you have for her. And I'm talking about the main producer. This was her baby in terms of the new doc on Hulu. So you guys are amazing. I hope you learned something. If you don't know anything about the case, if you do know the case, I hope you learned something there too. So, all right, y'all, thank you for hanging all night. It's been a long stream because without you, I literally would just be an old man talking about a lot of cases. Talk at you next time.